Good day, distinguished participants of the Central Asia Trade Forum. I would like to thank you all for your interest shown to the forum and to our session in particular. Trade in transit in Central Asia, existing challenges and possible digital solutions. The Central Asia Trade Forum is a well-established information platform that has been working for many years already and that has been very evidentiary to facilitating and contributing to simplification of the trade between the countries of the region. If you look at the data of the Asian Bank, of the World Bank, then the volumes of our trade do not exceed even 10%. And that's not a sufficient number. Why does this happen? Why do we have these kind of factors? And we've been speaking at all of our forums and sessions about the root causes of this situation. The organizers of our today's session is the Program for Simplification of Trade in Central Asia, funded and organized by GIZ, as well as the Partnership on Transport and Logistics in Central Asia. Just let me say a couple of words about our partnership. It was established at the under the Central Asian Trade Forum in 2017. And today's session is an anniversary session for us. We're celebrating the 5 years in establishment of our discussion platform, which our organization is an informal organization. We're kind of a public association, sort of. We discuss, we dispute, we develop the dialogue between the state and the private players that helps us to improve, and actually in which we get contributed and supported by not only GIZ project, but also by the USAID project. These are the partners with whom we have been working hand in hand for 5 years to develop and to simplify trade procedures in our region. You all know very well that the global transport logistical systems has suffered significantly from the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has been contributed as well by a number of factors, including the closing of borders, introduction of certain movement and travel restrictions for both vehicles and people. The supply chains were distorted and disrupted. The demand has declined as well. And all of these factors have adversely affected the transportation of cargo and cargo transportation. And all types of, all means of transportation have suffered from this very pandemic, from this very crisis. And of course, today's the freight forwarding and the expediency of freight forwarding is key for the countries of our region. On top of that, the agricultural sector has a role to play. Many of Central Asian countries are the exporters of agricultural produce, and actually timely delivery of agricultural produce, given that all of us are landlocked countries, makes us non-competitive when it comes to supply and delivery. On top of that, we do have internal competition, and all of that leads to certain complications for the agricultural sector as a whole. We do have many uncoordinated functions at the border crossing points. There are long queues and long lines of vehicles, and all of that affects negatively development of transport sector, development of logistics, and clearly transfer to digitization to a number of innovative approaches in the field of logistics are of paramount significance. And our today's session, called Trade and Transit in the Countries of Central Asia, Existing Problems, Our Challenges, and Possible Digital Solutions, is something that we will be discussing today. In our region, a number of surveys were conducted on the control points, and also the analysis included the main types of imported commodities. And some discrepancies were detected. Problems and limitations found and detected at the border points were detected. We do have 4 speakers today who will speak about all of these problems, and I hope that together with you we will develop certain solutions, certain recommendations to enable us gradually eradicate all of these negative factors. So let me some housekeeping statements. We will listen to the presentations of all of our speakers first, and then we will move on to the discussion. You can send your question in the chat. After all the speakers will have spoken, we will be reading some of the questions. There might be some comments, some proposals, some recommendations. We're very open, and actually we are hoping that our session will turn into an open dialogue where we could discuss all of the issues related to transit and trade in the region of Central Asia. We do have some minor changes to our program. Some of the speakers have changed. Instead of Yerlan Absatov, General Director of Kaz Logistics Union of Freight Forwarders Kazakhstan, our session has now Deputy General Director, Mr. Mukushev, who is attending our event here offline, And also, instead of Farukh Nimazadeh, the head of the online transport of the Ministry of Transportation of Tajikistan, we will have his colleagues, the chief specialist of the same online transportation department, Firgaz Rahimov. Well, now, distinguished colleagues, let me start with the work of our session, and I would like to give the floor to the organizers of our session. And first and foremost, those are Ms. Felicita Zik, the head of the regional program on simplification of trade-related procedures in Central Asia. Ms. Felicitas, are you here? Are you with us?
So you should see me. Yes. Just like this. Okay. Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen,
Участники
and participants of this forum.
Позвольте
Let me
поприветствовать всех вас от имени проекта
welcome
ГИЗЕ
you
«Упрощение процедур торговли в Центральной Азии»
at the
на
11th Central
ежегодном
Asian Trade Forum at the
глобальном
annual event.
форуме. К сожалению,
Well,
из-за
regrettably, due to the pandemic, we had some of the limitations. I mean, there are still some limitations applied to offline meetings. But despite any of those, we can still see each other, even via online channels. It is nice to note that the volume of trade in Central Asia is growing with some moderate pace. And today, more than 80% of trade is provided by an internal trade between the countries of Central Asia. And we are hoping that with every year, this inter-regional trade will only grow, and subsequently will grow the volume of internal inter-regional trade. At the same time, the pandemic has introduced this correction, and it affected our lives. In particular, the closing of borders and introduction of certain limitations and restrictions of transport have also affected the trade in Central Asia. According to the analysis and the survey which were conducted by our project and by our colleagues, we can also see a good dynamics of recovery and improvement in the field of transboundary trade between the countries in 2021. And today, during our session, you will have a chance to get familiarized with the results of the survey and the analysis of the transit of external agricultural trade and delivery of agricultural produce to the markets of the respective countries. And we will also be presenting a variety of innovative solutions that may facilitate trade in our regions. Now, let me thank the USAID for its fruitful collaboration in developing the region of Central Asia, and wish all of us a joint work aimed at strengthening of trade inside the Central Asia. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation, for attending our session, and I hope that you will receive a lot of useful and beneficial information from the speakers who were deliberately invited for this event. I wish all of you all the best. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Zik. Yes, we know that you are a reliable partner of ours. And I hope that we will continue working together, promoting and simplifying the trade procedures in Central Asia, and look forward to continued cooperation. Now, well, I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Larisa Kislякova. I'm the moderator. And at the moment, I'm the head of the Partnership and Transport Logistics in Central Asia. I will be making my own presentation under the private sector's initiative that was supported by GIZ program on simplification of trade procedures. It is the third time that we are conducting the monitoring of export agricultural produce by transit corridors and transportation corridors of Central Asia. Well, now I would like to introduce the results of the express study in the monitoring of expenses, time, and documents that are required in export of perishable goods via these countries of Central Asia. This monitoring was conducted considering three directions from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. We tried this year to carry out this monitoring along the same corridors and the same crossing points, which we included in our survey last year. So previously, we had a variety of different produce, perishable mostly, but this year we decided to assess and evaluate identical produce to see what kind of problems happen with the homogeneous type of goods. So the cargo will depart from north of Tajikistan and will be arriving to Moscow, and from Uzbekistan to Kazakhstan to Russia to Krasnoyarsk, and from Kyrgyzstan to Kazakhstan and to Russia to Novosibirsk. The survey took place in August 2021, end of July, beginning of August 2021. So as you can see on this slide, the distance on the first route from Tajikistan to Russia is 3,800 kilometers. The cargo made it in 4 days, and the total cost was $4,000. From Uzbekistan to Russia, the distance is 3,600 kilometers. Number of days were 4, and total cost was 4,200. From Kyrgyzstan, if you can see the distance, it turned out to be the shortest distance, and number of days were the longest, and the cargo made it in 7 days since the Rush Federation, and the total cost was $4,200. And why, if you ask me, it will become clear later. And we'll also speak about the problems that Kyrgyz exporters face when delivering their cargo to Russia via Kazakhstan. We looked at several control points. So, for instance, this is the control point of Tajikistan, Fatihabad, at the north of Tajikistan border control point with Uzbekistan. Did the timelines for 2020 and 2021. Some of the time reductions were not noticed. However, the only thing that we noticed visibly, that was the test results waiting time. Actually, earlier it was up to 72 hours that the drivers of trucks had to wait for their test results. Now, at the border crossing in Uzbekistan, the express samples are taken. I mean, the rapid tests are done, and actually it's done in only 20 minutes. And to that time, the due time or ground time is reduced. And that's a very positive change, thanks to which the time of cargo delivery has significantly reduced. Back then, it was true not only for perishable goods, but also the common consumption goods, and everyone enjoyed the same rates as everyone else. And another noteworthy is that countries also recognize the PCR test from other countries as valid for 72 hours. Actually, that's a very good achievement that was secured at the end of 2020, and actually it significantly affected the time of crossing the border point and customs point. If we look at Kyrgyzstan's control point, Aktelek, this year, actually, no sanitary control is being applied here. It seems to have been removed from the border control point, and the time of border control and the phytosanitary control remained the same, 20 and 15 minutes accordingly. So it didn't increase or it didn't reduce either. If we look at the control points of Uzbekistan, on this slide you can see that in 2020, the waiting for the results was 48 hours and more. However, this time made 20 minutes only. And there were no other significant changes affecting the time of crossing the control points in Uzbekistan, or they were not noted by our drivers. If we look at Kazakhstan and its situation, then last year, the loading, offloading of even agricultural produce took certain amount of time. And you can see on this slide how many hours it took. But this year, the perishable goods, perishable produce were no longer to be offloaded. They were sent directly without an examination. However, there is one problem that Kazakhstan-Russian border has, and that is so-called the Department of the State Revenues officers who are attending or present there, who check the commodities, the cargo from Kyrgyz Republic to exclude the smuggling or illegal cargo being shipped through the border. And for that purpose, and with that reason, actually, the cargoes are stalled for several days. And there are some reasons for that. We raised these issues, we discussed this issue, including at the regional meetings of the Trade Procedure Simplification Committee sessions. But these issues are now a priority for the agenda. Also, the survey looked at the infrastructure of the control points. Many drivers actually complain that most of these control points have inspection and verification complexes such as the X-ray machine or scanners, but unfortunately, the cars do not go through these scanners, so or not sent via these scanners. There is either no electricity, or they say that they do not work. They seem to be deliberately redirecting the vehicles or trucks to a manual inspection. That was the one complaint. The other one was the awaiting the COVID-19 test results. Last year, it was a big problem because there were no special parking lots or there were no any special waiting areas. The cars would, coil up. There will be no public areas, there will be no places to eat, no places to use the bathroom, and so on. And they're actually a significant problem. But this year, these two control points that were tested by our vehicles, the two of them in Uzbekistan, there is a neutral area. This kind of special waiting area, kind of parking area is organized, where the drivers can wait for the PCR test results. One-stop shop, you do all know what that means. It means that the driver, without leaving his vehicle, just hands over the document to the inspector or to the specialist, and then that everything is done like that, to cross the border. Unfortunately, only at the two control points, this kind of one-stop shop system was noted, but it's more a formality rather than practical implementation. As for the other control points, to look for us to look at the type of infrastructure, then there was a green corridor for perishable goods to prevent perishable goods from going bad while waiting in line. Also, an allocated lane for perishable cargo, and the there is no special line like that. And also the site for inspection of perishable goods. Oftentimes, when our perishable goods, which require a certain temperature, were opened and were examined in a special open air platform, and that leads to a reduction of a drop of temperature. That leads to the commodity or cargo going bad, despite it being delivered to the destination point. So these are the problems that we have inspected, and actually our drivers have detected. And unfortunately, these improvements are not there yet. However, many border control points are being restructured, specifically at the border of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, where they do have a physical lane, specially allocated, so a green lane, where perishable cargoes in the future and at the moment, and cargoes which have the books can go without any time waiting in line. If we look at all the points and the waiting time in 2020 and 2021, we noticed some improvement. For instance, in Aktelek, the waiting has reduced from 4 hours to 2 hours. That's 4 hours. In some crossing points in Kazakhstan, for instance, it went down from 6 hours to 1 hour. And that's a very significant change. We also looked at the border crossing in Russian Federation from 1 hour 15 minutes to 30 minutes only in Karasuk. So stops on the way. There were lots of complaints saying that the cars are stopped during transit, and apparently the highest number of such stops happened by demand by the road police or traffic police, and that was particularly noticeable in Kazakhstan. In 2020, such vehicles were stopped in 68%. However, in 2021, this number of stops dropped by almost half, 32.2. 32.3. Informal collections. Also, drivers complain that almost every agency at the border requires some informal payment, sort of. On top of the formal or official procedure that the drivers have to pay, there are also corruption-related elements when a bribe sort of fee is requested.
If we look at 2020, the highest collections were at the border crossing, 22%, and customs control accounted for 21% of such payments. And if we look at the data for 2021, these indicators have gone down significantly. That shows that we're introducing different mechanisms to combat corruption at the control points. And in a lot of countries, they work pretty well. For example, if we go back to earlier times, our transporters from Tajikistan, for example, didn't go via Uzbekistan because they were saying it takes a lot of time, there's a lot of corruption. But now everything went backwards. So it's actually 180%. It's all the other way around. So they go through the country officially. They only make official payments, and nobody throughout the whole transit, and nobody is asking for any bribes. If we look at the indicator results in general for relative to 2020. Well, if we compare 2020 to 2021, then the distance is pretty much the same for different routes, except for Tajikistan. Tajikistan was 3,800, and the shortest route is from Kyrgyzstan, 3,000 kilometers. The number of days, like I said, for example, from Uzbekistan, it went down because of the reduction in the waiting time for test results. In Kyrgyzstan, it hasn't changed, and in Tajikistan, the number of days for goods delivery went down. Overall costs remain the same. They stayed the same. And the reason for that, for example, in Tajikistan, the cost went up because last year they were bringing onion, and this year they're breeding prunes. And depending on the time of produce, the price goes up or down. And if we look at the average movement speed throughout the corridor, then it's not very bad. Just for comparison, if we look at the average speed with the delays that the Asian Development Bank assesses every year, it's 22.6. But if we take the Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia route, the average speed is 37, which is much higher than the average at the IMEC corridors. The slowest is for Kyrgyzstan, and this that is explained by the stops at the cross-border points, specifically when they're checked by the State Revenue Department representatives. In Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, the average speed is higher than the average speed. If we look at the comparable time that it takes to go through the control points, it has a downward trend. The first that I showed was 4.4 hours. This year it's 1.8 hours, despite the pandemic, despite the border closure and more thorough inspections. But there is a downward trend that exists. In Kyrgyzstan, it went down from 8.5 hours down to 0.5 hours. In Tajikistan, from 3 hours pretty much to 1 hour. And in the Republic of Uzbekistan, from 4 hours to 2.8 hours. And in the Russian Federation, the trend is not very, it's not changing much. But these indicators show that the state agencies are working. They're introducing new services, new procedures. All these procedures are being digitalized, and that results in shorter time that it takes to cross the border. And if we look at the stops en route upon the request of police, that pertains to Kazakhstan mainly. For example, in 2017, it was 46% for Kazakhstan. In 2020, it was 68%, and in 2021, it was 33.3%, which is a significant reduction. Some problems and challenges that were detected as a result of this survey of our transporters. Quite often pullovers by police, requirements of bribes and informal payments, and requirements of informal payments at cross-border points. A lack of information, instructions, and guidelines at border crossing points about existing procedures is another problem. Sometimes employees of these agencies that are at the border crossing points require unjustified documents that are not part of their working instructions. And for the drivers to know their rights, we may have to make sure that this information is available on some websites or at these border crossing points and border crossing sites. obtaining information about procedures, about novelties, introductions. It is very difficult to get all this information from one side and to get the standardized information. It's pretty much impossible. There was another problem, which was a lack of refrigerator trucks during the season, and the vehicles in our countries are obsolete. They're old. They're not in compliance with the requirements to actually be allowed to go through Europe. And another problem that our drivers were bringing up was a deficit of permits, so-called tier documents, which transporters use to enter and transit other countries, particularly during export of agricultural produce, which is very important. What were the recommendations that transporters came up with during this survey? We have to develop a mechanism of intergovernmental interaction of agencies controlling border crossings especially during force majeure situations, particularly the pandemic, which we were not ready for. Every country shut down, and the exporters and transporters suffered from all these measures and shutdown measures. Creating a mechanism of green corridor for perishable goods, such corridors, green corridors between the countries, they do exist on a bilateral basis. For example, Tajikistan has an arrangement with Uzbekistan and with the Russian Federation, but there is Kazakhstan en route, and we don't have this arrangement with Kazakhstan. So we need to develop this regional mechanisms to choose one corridor, common corridor that would be used to export perishable goods. On top of that, there are a lot of resolutions at the national level, but not all these resolutions are implemented. Those regulatory acts are implemented in practice. That's also very important. We need to develop a mechanism to enforce compliance with all these regulatory acts and regulatory requirements at all levels. Digitalization on transportation, particularly the electronic permits and licenses, this is as relevant as it has never been before, and we will talk about that later. Implementation of a unified weight certificate, that's also another problem, a big problem, because a lot of transportations and vehicles are weighed several times, and every weighing process is charged. So they have to pay charges for this weighing procedures, which affects the ultimate transportation cost of these cargoes. And then availability of official instructions for authorities that would be publicly available. These were the recommendations from our drivers who monitored these corridors. We have a lot to discuss, to talk about here. And with the support of this program to simplify trading procedures, we presented this at the national committees for simplification of transport procedures. And we hope that these problems will be resolved in the near future. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to finish my presentation, and I will be happy to take any questions or respond to any comments, and we're ready to discuss any proposals from our online participants. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to turn the floor to Mr. Pierre Bantona, the advisor on the simplification of trading procedures of the International Trade Center in Geneva. He's going to present on trade barriers in Central Asia and possible solutions. Pierre, are you with us?
Can you confirm?
Можете... Yes, we can see the screen. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Inviting the International Trade Center to contribute to this session and to this forum. My name is Pierre Bontonneau, and I work as a Senior Trade Facilitation Advisor at the International Trade Center, ITC, and the ITC is a joint agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization with a mandate to assist businesses and small and medium-sized enterprises in particular to harness international trade for growth, development, and prosperity. The ITC has been working in Central Asia for several decades now, and we are very happy to have this opportunity again to share some of the insight of our work with you and to foster cooperation with governments and other international partners. Today, I would like to share with you a few findings from our work under a dedicated project known as the Ready for Trade Central Asia project, funded by the European Union. The objective of this project, very briefly, is to promote intra-regional and international trade in Central Asia, and to do this by improving border environments, but also by enabling cross-border e-commerce. This is a 4-year initiative running from 2020 to 2024, and this project is implemented.
Pierre, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
No.
Could you please choose the English channel because nobody can hear you? The English-speaking presenter or the English-speaking audience cannot hear you.
Let me check.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I believe I'm on the channel. Is that okay now?
Yes, we can hear. The interpreters can hear you. I don't know about the rest.
Would be good to check. Okay, can I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, as I was mentioning, the findings I'm going to share with you stem from my initiative under this Ready for Trade Central Asia project. So this project, which is implemented in the 5 Central Asia countries, covers different streams of intervention, from promoting gender participation in trade, supporting e-commerce development in Central Asia, building the capabilities of businesses to engage into regional and international trade, but also to address some of these barriers that the business face when they cross the border. And you will see that many of the findings stemming from our work and many of the solutions that we are suggesting for the future are in line with the comments that we heard from our colleague Larissa earlier. Under this project, we have decided to opt for a slightly new approach. So under this initiative, we are looking at the obstacles to trade on specific bilateral trade flows. So we don't work in general at the country level or in general at the regional level, but we focus on the specific challenges faced by the business community on one type of trade between 2 countries, between one country of origin and one destination market, focusing on one specific product group. And as we analyze the problems on this specific trade flow, we try to look at all the possible barriers that businesses face when they want to engage into international trade, such as transportation cost, challenge to comply with documentary requirements, challenge to comply with the actual procedures that are required from the different border regulatory agencies, but also potentially the challenge faced by businesses when it comes to demonstrate compliance of their products with food safety requirements, among others. So under this project, we have analyzed 10 trade flows. So some of the trade flows, bilateral trade flows we looked at were trade flows towards the European Union. For example, the export of vegetable oil from Kazakhstan to the EU, or the export of beans from Kyrgyzstan to the European Union. But we also looked at intra-regional trade flow, trade between Central Asia countries. For example, the export of wheat flour from Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan, or the export of fresh fruits and vegetables from Tajikistan to Kazakhstan. So the methodology applied was really to zoom in a specific trade to make sure that we can come with very concrete problems and then very concrete solutions. Now, the approach that we are taking, or we have taken, is in 3 steps. First, and this is something we've already completed and that I will talk about, is to identify what are these problems that the businesses face when they want to engage in trade across these different areas that I've mentioned: transport, documentary compliance, formalities, procedures, quality requirements. Now, once the problems are identified, we then prioritize this problem in close consultation with the national governments in each of the Central Asian countries to assess which of these problems should be resolved first and under which circumstances. Now, some problems identified require more analysis, and this is the second phase of our initiative, and in the slide it is referred to as root cause analysis. Some problems that we've seen are symptoms, but you cannot, as a doctor, for example, you cannot prescribe a solution only to a symptom. You need to understand what is the underlying cause of the problems to be able to design policy solution that will really solve the challenges faced by businesses. Finally, the Ready for Trade Central Asia project is conducting this analysis with the exclusive objective to be able to implement some of the solutions. So the work that is being carried out in the Central Asian country is aimed at informing the design and future implementation of reform under this specific project. So now looking at the first phase on the identification of obstacles to trade. Over the past, I would say, 12 months, we have conducted some more than surveys, some large-scale interviews across the Central Asian countries, focusing on the stakeholders that are effectively involved on these trade flows that I mentioned. So these were very advanced questionnaire interviews, pretty much 1 hour, 1.5 interview with each respondents. And we conducted these interviews across Central Asia, physically, when it was possible, through focus groups, bilateral discussion, and also sometime remotely because of the new COVID-19 constraints. Now, moving quickly to the findings. Clearly, what stemmed from the respondents, and the respondents came both from the private sector, but also from the logistics service providers like freight forwarding companies, transport companies, logistics companies, and regulatory officials as well, a representative of the governments. All the problems could be, to a large extent, categorized into 4 big categories that you can see on the graph below, on the graph on the slide. So here you've got an overview of the response for the entire Central Asia region, for the entirety of the trade flows that have been analyzed. But of course, we had specific analysis and information on each of the country, each of the specific trade flows, on which I won't have the time to go today. But what was very clear is that businesses face problems in the 4 following areas. Access to finance remains one of the key challenges faced by the business community in Central Asia. Challenges to obtain the appropriate banking support to engage into international trade because of complex procedures, but because also of very complex formalities and high interest rates. We see also that transportation is one of the key barriers to trade identified by the business community in Central Asia. And I believe this echoes very much what our colleague Larissa was saying earlier. But there are also other types of problems that have emerged from this discussion with the business community in Central Asia. And we see that the complexity of procedures at the border, but also behind the border, is one of the key hindrances that the private sector is facing today when they want to trade, whether intra-regionally or towards external markets like the European Union. So complexity of trade formality remains very high on the agenda of the business community, and so is all the challenges in relation with quality certificates. SPS certificates, TBT certificates, obtaining them, having them recognized is still a critical element for the business community. Now, interestingly, what we've seen is these problems are very much the same across all Central Asia countries. There are, of course, some disparities depending a bit on the trade flow on the countries, but overall, the signal and the message is the same. These are the four big pots, clusters of issues that needs to be resolved if we want regional trade to be enhanced. Now, a few of the problems that emerged, and I think we heard already many of them from Larissa's presentation earlier. When it comes to transportation, we heard about the long queues at the border crossing, sometimes due to unexpected closure of the borders. We heard also about the lack of availability of trucks, wagons, depending on the country, especially in peak seasons, and of refrigerated trucks, of course. We heard a bit about the problem of asymmetrical trade flows between the region, where the trade is not necessarily balanced between the country, creating distortion in the transport prices. Finally, we heard a lot from the business community that the lack of tools to see the availability of the transport asset was a problem, that they lacked the transparency on where the trucks, the wagon, where and when they would be available, making additional problems for them to plan their trade operations. Coming to customs procedures, we heard a lot, and I'll come back to this, to the excessive levels of documentation required to import or export within the region. The formalities behind the border and at the border crossing remains higher than the business would like them to be in order to be competitive in international markets. As Larissa was saying, we also heard very strongly that the lack of green corridors mechanism across the region is detrimental to trade, and that it would be important to build upon existing best practices, like between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, to make sure that perishable goods across the region can be traded with as limited time and delays as possible. Moving to the quality part, quality standards and testing, I think across the countries, we heard that businesses face difficulty in obtaining certificates on one side, and on the other side, to make sure that these certificates are recognized in the destination countries. We heard from Larissa the problem with the weight bridge certificates, but the same problem happened with many of the certificates involved in trade. So certificates of conformity, food safety certificates issued by one country are frequently not recognized by the destination country, thus leading to double testing, double inspection, which unnecessarily increase the cost of doing business. Overall, throughout the region, we also hear a lot the challenges in relation with the accreditation of laboratories, where many traders need to send their samples far away in order to obtain test results that would be recognized by other countries, because the testing capabilities within the region remains a bit below par. Now, we collected all these problems, and I'm just sharing a few items along the way. And what we've done with all these problems is that in each country, we organize public-private dialogue with the business community and the governments to try to identify what were the key priorities for improving the border environment and the border conditions. I'm happy to share these slides after. I don't want to guide you through all the detailed problems that have been identified by the different countries. I think I've mentioned some of them already. Now, what's very important here is that a lot of the work we've conducted is based on what we could call business perception. So this is how the private sector, how the business community feels about the trade environment in Central Asia. But we were also able to objectivize this situation. And here on the screen, you have an overview of the formalities required to export dairy from Kyrgyzstan. So this is the process an exporter must go through in order to export dairy from Kyrgyzstan. And then the similar process of the same level of complexity is likely to be there on the import side in Kazakhstan, for example. And what you can see on the screen is that to export dairy from Kyrgyzstan as of today, a business has to undertake 45 different steps in order to clear its good out of the country. 45 steps. So this objectivize the procedural complexity of trade in the country. And of course, when there are many steps, there are also many documents. And in the case, again, of the export of dairy from Kyrgyzstan to Kazakhstan, for example, which is the trade flow we focused on, we can see that not less than 53 unique documents are required along the way in order to obtain all the license, all the permits, all the certificates required to export the good out of the country. 53 documents. And many of these documents are, of course, required multiple times by border regulatory agencies, leading to probably 150 or 200 documents having to be handed out and processed by the private sector. And one can, of course, understand how this complexity of trade has a negative impact on the ability of the business community to integrate further into intra-regional trade and international trade. So now this was about, I would say, the problems identified. And now the project, this Ready for Trade Central Asia project, is moving towards the identification of the underlying root causes of these problems, and simultaneously to try to introduce some solutions to resolve some of these problems. So in the coming months, in close coordination with our partners in each country, we will try to work in simplifying trade formalities. And here, based on the understanding of all the documents, all the steps that are required to trade, we will try to devise solutions in order to make the trade environment simpler. Reduce the number of documents from 53 to 40, maybe. Reducing the number of steps from 45 to 30. Trying to digitalize some of these formalities and some of these steps, potentially by enhancing the scope of existing single window solutions in the country. On the quality issue, the project is now starting a regional analysis of the root cause for the non-recognition of certificates across border. Food safety certificates coming from one country are not recognized by the other countries. And everybody we've been talking to has different explanation for why quality certificates are not recognized. So what we want to do again here is to objectivize the situation by comparing in each country the mandatory requirements for import and export to make sure that these requirements are aligned, by understanding the specific capabilities of the certification bodies in each country and the level of accreditation, but also understanding further the capabilities of the laboratories themselves to demonstrate compliance of a product with a certain requirements. And we hope that from this analysis, we will be able then to support countries in getting the equipment they need for their laboratories, for their certification bodies, that we will be able to provide the trainings that they need, that we will be able to provide maybe sometime the supply that is missing in some countries for the test to be conducted, and maybe in the long run to help some of this conformity assessment body to obtain accreditation and or enter into mutual recognition agreement with each other so that certificates coming from country A is automatically recognized in country B, thus alleviating the need for double inspection and double testing. Finally, on the side of transport, and I know one of the panelists will talk about this a bit further, we are currently discussing with many of the countries the opportunity to introduce what is known as virtual borderline management, which are systems that allows truck drivers to come to the border crossing only at the time where officials would be able to inspect them. And this solution has proven to be extremely effective in other parts of the world to reduce the delays and to reduce the congestion at border crossings. And in the coming months, we'll organize a study tour for many representatives from Central Asia to go see in other countries how these systems have improved drastically transport and truck drivers' condition at border crossings. Now, I would like to finish today by talking about one initiative that is already implemented and that resonates with one of the key problems that Larissa mentioned earlier. So we heard earlier that understanding the trade formalities in the region is very complex, and that there is no one-stop shop to get all information in a standardized manner on how to trade within the region. Well, the Ready for Trade Central Asia project and ITC in general is implementing solutions to solve these problems. So we are currently implementing what are known as trade facilitation portals across the Central Asian region in Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. But beyond the region, we are implementing similar initiatives in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And this portal that I will show you in 1 minute provides very detailed information on what is required to import or export within a country. And because we use the same technology across the region and beyond, reaching out again to Afghanistan and Pakistan, we will be able to provide door-to-door view to traders on what it takes to export from one country and import in another country throughout corridors within Central Asia. And we hope that by providing this level of information and by providing this transparency solution, will improve the business condition in Central Asia. So now, as a concluding elements, I just want to give you a feel of what these portals look like, showing the only portal that is active now in Tajikistan, but similar portal will soon be launched in all other Central Asian countries, starting with Kyrgyzstan on 11th of November this year, where this portal will be officially launched with the presence, hopefully, of the Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan. So just showing you this solution 1 second so that you see what the project is trying to achieve. Can you see what looks like an internet web page?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Great. So what we are doing in all the Central Asian countries today, active in Tajikistan, but coming up soon in all other countries, is to create these portals where, for a specific trade flow, in this example, the import of flour via railway in Tajikistan, a trader can see the sequential list of steps that it needs to undertake in order to comply with import requirements, coming from obtaining permits to managing the border crossing, preparation of the customs clearance, obtain phytosanitary control act, epidemiological conclusion, certificates of conformity, going through the customs clearance, etc., etc. So this portal consolidates in one place all the requirements stemming from every border regulatory agencies involved in the trade. And business can easily see all the documents that they need to provide in order to comply with all these formalities. They have a full transparency on all the fees and charges that are required in order to pay for the border services. And this will be available, as I said, in every country. So I really encourage all businesses, but also international partners to make use of this information, as it provides an exhaustive view of what it takes to trade in Central Asia. And in addition to the transparency these tools will generate, we hope it will be the foundation for simplifying trade formalities across the region. And on this note, I thank you and look forward to questions and comments during the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for your very interesting presentation. And truly, your presentation corroborates, so to say, the survey that private sector carries out. And if you ask me why, then I tell you, when we did have this kind of survey, we lacked certain methodology. We have prepared the checklist, and we had the driver tick the boxes when crossing the border. So he had to document the time, the payments, the time in line, and so on. And then, however, you do have a methodology. You did have interviews, and all the problems that actually you have simply they resonate with our problems. I do have a question for you, but I think I will ask it in the Q&A part after all the speakers have spoken. And the question would be about the follow-up of this survey's destiny, whether you're going to present it to the public agencies. Well, thank you very much, Pierre. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the survey that you have done. And this is extremely, extremely important, valuable survey. I see some questions in the chat to you and about the quality certificates and so on. I'm sure we will ask them later on. Well, now, distinguished participants, distinguished colleagues, I would like to give a floor to Mr. Mukushev, Kanat Mukushev, Deputy General Director of Kaz Logistics Company, and we will speak with him about innovative approach to simplification of border crossing, namely introduction of electronic queues or electronic lines that have already been mentioned by Pierre. And Mr. Mukushev is experienced in working with private companies and public agencies. He is a member of the Public Council under the Ministry of Investment and Infrastructural Development. He is the honorary automobile sector activist, and he is now the deputy director of the Kazakhstan's Association of Freight Forwarders. It's a large association that brings together all transportation means, whether railways or motor or cargo trucks and so on. Kazakhstan is a trailblazer, in introducing the electronic queues. In fact, it was very effective and proved to be very effective during the pandemic. There were huge lines at the Chinese-Kazakh border, and after we have introduced that, the lines have evaporated. So thank you very much. I'm sure it will be very interesting to listen to your experience. Thank you, Ms. Valna. Well, distinguished participants of the session, on behalf of the Union of Freight Forwarders of Kazakhstan, Kaz Logistics, welcome you and wish you a very fruitful work. I would also like to thank GIZ and USAID for the invitation to attend and to participate in this forum. The modern practice shows the accumulation or coiling up of cars at the border happens due to lack of information in the forwarders or with the forwarders about the situation at the border and the lines that accumulated there. Actually, under the current circumstances, also due to the aggravation of the pandemic situation, we are no exception. This kind of situation happens everywhere in the world. And now, with the growth of trade turnover, separate countries introduce electronic queues at their border crossing points. Belarus and Georgia have some positive examples. In fact, they have a booking system. This kind of line or time slot booking system was introduced long ago. As of 1st of June 2021, electronic queue system was introduced in Russian Federation at the three program points, that's Pogranichny, Kraskina, and Poltavka crossing points. In mid-May 2021, due to aggravation of quarantine measures by Chinese authorities, and as a result reducing the number of trucks that were crossing the border per day, on the Russian side, the cars began gathering or packing, and at Pogranichny crossing point, up to 400 trucks arrived and were waiting simultaneously. And that kind of situation could have negatively affected the epidemiological situation. During the limitations, during this limitation, actually, thanks to introduction of the electronic queue, these lines have disappeared. And actually, the electronic queues have been introduced in a pilot mode. And as of 1st of June, they introduced it effectively, properly. The system works. It's simple. It's understandable. It's transparent for all the stakeholders, all the parties. At the internet side, the government of the Primorsk province updates the list of trucks or the list of vehicles that can arrive to an area adjacent to crossing point. So this list is made on the based on the list of submissions submitted there by the traders or by the exporters. So daily, about 90 or 100 vehicles cross the Pogranichny border crossing point. At the 1st of January 2015, all the vehicles crossing the state borders of Brest crossing point go through the electronic queue system. And it is noteworthy that actually the fee is collected only should the time be booked from the waiting area. Actually, the rest of the vehicles that do not have any book time move in a regular line, with the difference, though, that when they arrive to the waiting area, every vehicle is registered by the operator, and his or her data and license plate number, as well as a queue number, is then displayed on a big display, on a big monitor. The releasing from the waiting area to go to the inspection area through the state border will be carried out in the sequence as determined by the electronic queue.
For electronic booking of time to enter the border cross point, you have to register the website. At the same time, booking of the time can be registered no sooner than 3 hours prior to the expected time of border crossing. The booking of time of entrance is paid. In 2011, we changed the procedure of crossing the Estonian and Russian border. According to this new procedure, a unique info system of lines for border crossing has been introduced that is applied in 3 border crossing sites in Estonia. When going from Estonia, that's Narva Ivan, Koidula, Konichina Gora, and Luhai Mashunikina. And next to each border crossing point, a waiting area is created where drivers can wait for their time to cross the border. The changes of the crossing border procedure happened this year on the 16th of August. The payment for registration of lifeline to cross categories A and B of transportation is free of charge. These transportation vehicles are registered in line once they enter the waiting area using the automated technical solutions. Booking of the time for border crossing at a certain time or a certain date is paid for. The situation when there's no line and the vehicle that has booked the time, or the category A or B vehicle that has booked time, is sent directly to the border crossing point, and the payment is not returned. On the 16th of July 2021, the organization of waiting time in lines is taken care of by Gosvis, which is a Kolada and a transfer service. All of them are private companies. Preliminary booking of border crossing and CoSwift can be done in the Estonian, English, and Russian languages. And information on vehicles and people that plan to cross the border is submitted. And that can be done electronically via email by calling a phone of the booking center. And a transportation vehicle that comes to the border without preliminary booking can be registered in the lifeline located next to the border crossing, next to the waiting area, next to the border crossing line. And you cannot register in line at the border crossing site itself. Time can be booked 90 days ahead of time. When you book the time in line, the information system for the line you're at the border crossing site, you have to pay for the booking and the amount of €1.5, and the payment for the waiting area according to the category of the vehicle. The information about the payment can be found on the website. Now I would like to share with you some experience in Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, the life has made us go to the electronic system, electronic lines. So I'm going to share with you the Kazakhstani experience. Because of introduction of limitations, because of coronavirus, the Kyrgyzstan, China, border crossing, the Republic of Kazakhstan has been moved to the limited mode of operations. And since July of 2020, we saw a lot of vehicles accumulating at the border crossing, and the line was about 60 kilometers and accounted for over 1,000 vehicles. The delays in transportation border crossing at the Kazakhstan-China border can be split into two parts. Between July and October 2020, due to deterioration of epidemiological situation in the Republic of Kazakhstan, the control measures have been strengthened to allow Chinese vehicles or vehicles from China to Kazakhstan. And from the middle of 2020 until now, in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, introduced strict quarantine measures by China, which led to accumulation of vehicles on the Kazakhstani side. And the vehicle transportation, the Xinjiang China introduced limited measures because of the world pandemic and its consequences. And after that, Bakhty, Maykapchiga, and Kolzhan border crossing points were closed, which led to an increase of low to Nurjali border crossing. During the quarantine, China instituted the following algorithms for transportation border crossing. Kazakhstan trucks will be entering China and leave their trucks for loading, and then the drivers leave China and wait at the Kazakhstani side while the trucks are being loaded, and Chinese special vehicles will be taking those trailers to Kazakhstan once those trailers have been loaded. We can use semi-trailers, refrigerators, and trails, except for transportation vehicles, which trails cannot be separated from trucks. These measures made it more difficult to transport cargoes cross-border and led to accumulation of vehicles at the Nurjali border crossing point. The union, together with the Transportation Committee, Mir RK, and the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs monitored the situation of the transportation leaving and coming into the country through this border crossing points. Because of numerous visits to Nurjali, because of working meetings and interviews with drivers, representatives of border crossing point services, and State Revenue Committee of the Republic of Kazakhstan, we took a decision to introduce the electronic line system. And because of that, entering the Nurjali border crossing point is allowable only for vehicles that have been registered at the gocargo.kz. Since October 2020, at the Nurjali and the Kazakhstani border crossing point, registration has been introduced for semi-trailers, trailers, tents, and refrigerators in the online system of registration. Once registered, on the 1st of September 2020, from 2030, a line started to form for the 2nd of September 2020, and it was formed based on the list from the emergency office. During the first registration, an office was organized with a consultant and a working space. Since the 2nd of September 2020, only registered vehicles registered with the gocargo.kz are allowed to enter the border crossing point. And this system, depending on the type of category of goods, export, humanitarian goods, etc., are divided based on the priority. And the system provides for limitation of secondary crossing for transportation vehicles since the last access to the Kazakhstan on the territory of Kazakhstan of less than 14 days. That means that vehicles will be done on the same day. If the vehicle doesn't enter the country at the same assigned day, they cannot enter the country in the next day, because that may lead to delays in the electronic line, electronic queue. The driver or transporter can ask consultants using phone numbers if they have any questions, or they go directly to their office located at the warehouse or at the border crossing site. And the data of vehicles is published in the list of vehicles without cargo The Go Cargo service follows the relevance and tracks the relevance of this line and vehicles in this list, and they update and publish it on the website as well as in WhatsApp and Telegram chats as the line moves along. In turn, the users of the system can track their numbers in line as the line changes. Upon the decision of the Minister of Internal Affairs, once the Go Cargo service receives letters for remote services, these letters are deleted from the system immediately. The vehicles are deleted from the line immediately, and the reasons are specified in writing. And the new lists for removal are sent out to chats with the names of drivers and owners of vehicles. The operative response and coordinated activities of all the stakeholders allowed us to regulate this issue and remove social tension, which was increasing but didn't still kept the fact relevant that we will have to deal with border crossing points. As part of the pilot project, we plan to launch an electronic queue in the Kanazbayev border crossing point on the border with Uzbekistan, and the drivers will be provided with the service of booking the line by registering on the website of the electronic queue system, eborder.kz. This system is transparent and convenient, and once the driver is registered on the website, he chooses a date and time to cross the border, and the driver will receive an email and a text message about their line, a number in line, based on the time and date at the Kaunas-Baiva border crossing point. The information monitor will show, the driver can use this monitor to track their line, and using the video surveillance camera. And this camera will scan the license plate and open the border. And this electronic line allows transporters to plan their transportation on time. And these steps on digitalization for border crossing will have a positive impact on goods turnover and transit potential and capacity. Thank you. Thank you, Kanat, for your presentation. Electronic queues is one of the first steps in digitalization of services during border crossing. We were faced with what you were talking about, the Brest border crossing between Belarus and Poland. And the situation there is a little different. There are several physical corridors. So the trucks are going via one corridor, passenger cars are going another corridor, etc. And every corridor has an electronic queue. We've never saw any accumulation of trucks or vehicles. And the border control guy took our passports. We had representatives from 4 countries. He went back. He came back, brought up the passports, and we experienced ourselves what it is to go through the border crossing point very quickly. And I think that the electronic queue is the first step, because when you come and the procedures of different agencies that perform this border crossing procedure are not regulated. For example, customs clearance 10%, phytosanitary control 5 minutes, and without this transparency, there will be delays. However, there is an example, like like I said, Kazakhstan is the first example in the region on implementation of such services, introduction of such services, and we hope that with the support of the projects and ITC and other projects that are ready to implement and maybe choose one corridor to implement it, be that a green corridor, an electronic queue, at least for the export of agricultural produce. Thank you very much. I think we should organize some experience exchange and the visit of our transportation specialists to show them how it works at the site. I would also like to add, 2 weeks ago, I visited the Nurjali border crossing site. This is a very up-to-date, high-tech border crossing point with a capacity of allowing 200,000 vehicles a day, and they have 3 different corridors, so passengers, for pedestrians, passenger vehicles, and trucks. And there is a waiting area that is equipped with everything that's needed to expedite the process of border crossing. Thank you. Dear participants, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We have one more presenter, and we have very little time, but we keep receiving questions in the chat. So, Firdaus Rahimov, please, the floor is yours. Just a few minutes for you to cover the situation on electronic licenses and transportation permits in Tajikistan, because you're representing the Ministry of Transportation of Tajikistan. You have quite an extensive experience of working in the system. You are familiar with the existing problems. So the floor is yours. The mic is
Спасибо, Лариса
yours.
Павловна.
Thank you, Larissa.
Разрешите прежде всего
Well, first
выразить
of all, I would like
благодарность
to
за
thank
участие в
everyone.
таком
Thank you for inviting me to
хорошем
participate in this very
форуме.
interesting forum, and to thank the USAID project for organizing this meeting. I should say that in order to improve and develop international vehicle transportation between connections between Central Asian countries, as based on Uzbekistan's experience on implementation of digital permits to be used in international goods transportations and shipment, the Ministry of Transportation is implementing the activities on implementation of electronic permits, transit permits. Therefore, this plan of activities or action plan has been approved by the resolution of the government of the Republic of Tajikistan on the 29th of December 2020. And this action plan consists of 29 modules, and its implementation period is 2 years, starting with 2021 until 2023. Currently, with the support of the USAID project and GIZ project, this program is being implemented, and we're preparing. We're going through some technical issues right now, and in the near future, we will launch this work. I should say that the use of paper certificates and paper permits, in the current situation, our transporters in Tajikistan are faced with the problem of procuring or obtaining these blanks or these forms, and this problem has led to prices being raised artificially, and because of that, we're seeing an increase in corruption in this area. Currently, the problem was very relevant, and these permits have been delivered based on the negotiation results. We bought these forms from our colleagues in Uzbekistan, so we found a temporary solution to this issue, but the problem still remains, and it is the problem is that implementation had if our system were to be launched, then we could resolve these issues, these problems, and overcome these problems. But currently, along with implementation of the implementation and introduction of this transit permits, we are providing for implementation of so-called we're on digitalization of electronic invoices or airway bills, and And the use of permits, transit permits, is also included in this project. I hope that in the near future, once we implement this pilot project between the Republic of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan on the use of electronic permits, to improve the system as part of the international transportation corridors, we hope that other countries will also join this project or this initiative and will contribute to the development of international road transportation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Firdaus. I know that this problem does exist, and in order to make sure that everything is transparent, the transit permits, they are very effective when external trade volume is more or less balanced between the two countries. When there is a disbalance, for example, export significantly exceeds or import or the other way around, this system is not relevant. And the whole world should move towards the bilateral arrangements, trade arrangements, without any permits or unified permits for several countries. We need to pilot that, try out different ways, because the problem does exist. And we can talk about this. And there are examples of other countries that have to be implemented. We need to see our state agencies to get engaged to make sure that these issues are transparent. Thank you very much to your colleagues. I think we've exhausted our session for today. We discussed all the questions, but we're receiving several questions, so let's take some of them.
There was a question from Aziz Rasulov, who asked the following question. What kind of specific activities are being undertaken under your program on simplification of trade procedures to eradicate the corruption, such as unjustified payments and demands for informal pays and fees and so on? We are the partnership. Yes, we do represent the private sector. We do detect, we do see those problems. But unfortunately, we believe that in order to solve this problem, we first need to ensure the transparency of all the procedures. We need to set up the deadlines and the time frames, very clear time frames for all the procedures. For instance, in Uzbekistan, for each step of the border control, there is a certain timeline is being set. And if the time is excessive, kind of them is spent too much, then the detection or investigation is carried out. Our, for instance, transporters have made a record of crossing the Turkish and Georgian border of 2 minutes only. Why does that? What does it mean? It means that there is collaboration, there is understanding between all the agencies, and there are only border control officers there, and all the post-customary clearance happens not at the border control point, but in specifically allocated locations, maybe some cross-border terminals and so on. If that is the case, then of course the borders will be easy and fast to cross, and there will be no problems like this. This is what we need to aspire for, and this is what we need to use as a role model for ourselves. Another question to Pierre, mostly. What successes did you achieve in Turkmenistan in the trade facilitation thanks to ITC project? Pierre, can you take this question? What advancement did you have in Turkmenistan? And if you could list those solutions, is there going to be a virtual linear management in Turkmenistan?
In Turkmenistan, so far, our work has focused on the implementation of the trade facilitation portal that I demonstrate. So the similar model than the one established in Tajikistan. And we are currently working in close collaboration with our partner in Turkmenistan, to make sure that this system will be soon live to provide transparent information on trade formalities to the business community. In addition to this, we are working in Turkmenistan on the establishment of, let's say, a virtual learning system, which is a pedagogical solution online, a kind of e-learning solution where traders and exporters and importers from Turkmenistan will be able to obtain detailed information and trainings on how to comply with cross-border formalities to import and export out of Turkmenistan, Central Asia, and the EU. We're also working at the company level in coaching many business to improve their compliance with cross-border formalities. And I think as of today, we have coached close to 50 businesses and helped them access new market and solve some of the practicalities that, that they face when engaging into international trade. Now, on the pure front of trade facilitation, in the case of Turkmenistan is a little specific in the sense that the government of Turkmenistan requested ITC to focus more on the WTO accession process that Turkmenistan is considering rather than go deep in the trade facilitation work. However, I take from your question that Turkmenistan may be interested in learning more about virtual line management systems, and we would be very happy to rope Turkmenistan in this discussion on how to introduce this type of technology at the border crossings to reduce the delays faced by transporters. I take this opportunity also to flag, to answer a question that was submitted on the chat on the different IT solutions, maybe in line with virtual line management system. I think our colleagues mentioned GoSwift, which is, I think, the world leader in the area of virtual line management system at border crossings. We know that there are a good solution in Belarus as well, and you may have mentioned it. We are also working in close collaboration with an operator that is working on the digitalization of transport processes at the Casablanca port in Morocco, and whose solution is also applied in different government services setting in Russia. So there are many solutions available across the board, and I think it is great that Central Asia is really at the forefront of this work on virtual line management system, because there are only 5 to 10 countries in the world that do have those systems. So it's great to see that your region is ahead of the curve, I would say, and that you are already implementing and considering the implementation of this system. Once again, ITC stands ready to support Central Asian countries to pilot some of this virtual line management system at selected border crossings. And as I mentioned, in the coming days, your governments should receive some formal invitation to participate to a study tour, most likely in Estonia, to see how concretely these systems operate at border crossing. And what is very important to us is, of course, that the community of transporters, that the Transport Association are part of this study tour so that they can contribute to selecting the best possible solution to improve border crossings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. And there was another question to me, whether a similar survey on monitoring of export of agricultural produce conducted for Turkmenistan. Unfortunately, we did not include Turkmenistan in our survey, but our partners and the members of our Transport and Logistics Partnership, they do have a question. And actually, they're requesting us to include Turkmenistan in a similar survey next year. I mean, after Turkmenistan was closed due to COVID, pandemic, our drivers had to seek some alternative routes, and sometimes it was, trial and error method. We tried to go via Afghanistan through a seaport, and all of those kind of alternative routes were tested. And there will be another session tomorrow. Not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, it will be devoted to alternative routes. And it will be interesting to listen what we have detected as a result of this survey, because new routes, I mean new expenses, new obstacles, new impediments, and new barriers that need to be detecting and need to be handled. There was another question about the quality certificate, whether they are recognized when exporting goods to Europe, and whether the certificates whether certificates issued by 17025 laboratories are recognized in Europe. I worked on this direction as well. I worked on the quality certificate of our produce that is exported to Europe and to Arab countries. And oftentimes, our laboratories are actually accredited under 17025 standard, but unfortunately, not all the methods of testing is used. For instance, for honey, not all the antibiotics, honey is not tested for all the antibiotics. That's why we have to submit, for instance, the honey samples to the destination countries for their laboratories to test and to issue quality certificates. So certification accreditation is important, and it's not relevant to the freight forwarders, but actually it's maybe more relevant to the exporters and to the bodies responsible for certification. But as far as I know, every agency works at the national level. And actually, if you ask me why certificates are not recognized, then inside the CIS we have a number of councils, number of agreements on recognition, mutual recognition of such quality certificates. But they are not. They should be recognized, but they do not get recognized. And why? There seems to be some lacking mechanism to endorse that. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to intensify the dialogue between the state and between the private players. The GIZ project, Simplification of Trade Procedures, is a great project. I mean, they have a great initiative for meeting of the national committees on trade simplification, our trade simplification committees meeting. So Uzbekistan is not a member of WTO, but it is still invited, and we do discuss the regional problems. We are not going from, private individual cases to kind of general cases, but try to discuss the regional trends, and we try to address some regional problems so that through the national committees we could discuss and address these problems. Well, summarizing or wrapping up this session, I would like to express my gratitude to all the organizers, to all the panel speakers for their very interesting presentation, and for development of a public-private dialogue. Because, well, no matter how active the business is, no matter what problems or what issues we raise, without collaboration with the state agencies, without the support, and without the support of the international players and partners, we won't be able to solve this problem at the regional level. And today's objective is to make our region transparent, to make a safe and secure transit through our country, so that it will be safe for the exporters, for the traders, to export and import and to trade together while accessing the European market. I wish all of us all the best, the success. All the recommendations that were expressed today will be voiced on a different platform. They will be raised in a different locations. And see you soon, hopefully in a year time, in an offline mode at a similar session. And I hope that by then we will have some yields to show and some results of trade simplification and civilization. Thank you. Thank you, and Pacifica, thank you to the organizers. And I ask you to stay tuned, because in half an hour we will launch a roundtable, the problems of developing the international freight forwarding activity, the problems of the fleet amortization and deterioration. Very interesting issues will be raised there again. Thank you.
Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to welcome you at our event. My name is Jandos Zineshev. I am an expert on anti-crisis and strategic communications, Eurasian Center for People Management. I am pleased to welcome you at our roundtable. Once again, it's called Problems of International Transport Development and upgrade of the fleet. So this event takes place as part of the 11th Central Asian Trade Forum, Central Asia Recovery after Post-Pandemic Recovery through expansion of interregional cooperation. Let me remind you who's going to be presenting during today's session. Maksat Saktaganov, the president of the Union of Legal Entities, the Union of Automobile Transporters of the Republic of Kazakhstan, KazAuto. He's going to be talking about utilization fees in the Republic of Kazakhstan, the problems of replenishment of fleet. Mukushev Kurmat, deputy director of the Union of Transportation Logistics Companies and Associations, Kaz Logistics, and he's going to be talking about the support and methods of protection of representatives of national business community. Stepchenko Vladimir, director of the transportation company LM Trans Group LLP, and he's going to be talking about stumbling blocks and the existing realities, and Pavel Tsilitsyn, the director of the AT Logistics company, and he's going to be talking about business perspectives on existing realities, the necessary needs to increase the fleet. The Chebenko Dmitry, the representative of the Association of International Road Carriers of Uzbekistan, ARCUZ, he's the head of the group of the Information Analytical section, and he's going to be talking about Uzbekistan's experience on replenishment of fleet, benefits of the government, and new perspectives of accession to ES. Larisa Kizikova, Central Asian Transport and Logistics Partnership Chairperson on Transportation Logistics in Central Asia. Dear colleagues, let me remind you what we're going to be talking about and which questions and problems we're going to be discussing today. The state of matters on replenishment and upgrade of fleet that takes place that participates in international transportation, because right now transporters cannot upgrade their own fleet with vehicles that would be in compliance with European standards. We'll also talk about problems of high fees of utilization fees and primary registration fees. We'll discuss the issues of state benefits and advantages of neighboring European countries in support of international automobile transporters, and problems of the conditions of the roads in the Republic of Kazakhstan, the loads for businesses in terms of taxation will also be a question to be discussed today. And on top of that, we're going to talk about a lot of structural issues of the modern state of the industry, which area we're moving towards, and what the probable and possible development perspectives are. And on top of that, I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that each speaker's presentation is for no more than 15 minutes. So please, speakers, stick to the technical requirements to make sure that we have enough time for the discussions of different issues at the end. And we are waiting for questions from our participants as well. So as you all know and remember, about 70% of vehicles are at a very low level, and this equipment is obsolete that requires to be written off because ineffectiveness of their use during in international transportation. That implies a lot of problems in terms of implementation of different operations, transactions, and Kazakhstan in regional business incurs significant losses and is faced with significant difficulties while implementing different types of work. So I'm not going to keep you long, and I'd like to turn the floor to Maksat Saktaganov, the president of KazAuto, and he's going to be talking about the problems of the market, high commissions during procurement of trucks in Kazakhstan. So, Mr. Saktaganov, the floor is yours. Thank you, dear speaker. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues. I'm representing the Association of International Transporters in the Republic of Kazakhstan. It's called KazAuto. We have 350 transportation companies, about 10,000 trucks. We're scattered all around Kazakhstan. We're representing interests of the international transporters of the Republic of Kazakhstan. A few words, introductory words. I'm going to talk about how we happened what we were like before the economic zone and after the economic zone. So before that, we had some duties and fees, and we were somehow protected. Now we've become a big family, part of the economic union, and we've introduced this concept of new taxes. And Kazakhstan is also a member of the WTO, and all our members, member countries are members. Our neighboring countries are members of WTO. But I'd like to show you the first table. Table number 2. I just wanted to show you what fees we have to pay, what WTO members have to pay. 30%, this is 30% tax for a new vehicle in Kazakhstan, 20% in Ukraine. There's no tax in Germany and Belarus. There's no tax up for 2 years, up to 2 years, up to 2 years. In in Russia, you pay 32%. In Uzbekistan and Germany, there's no tax. In Russia, it's 27, and in Belarus, it's 10. Up to 2 years, it's 44%, 31%, 36, 58, and 83. So every country is protecting their own market by introducing fees, by collecting fees such for primary registration and further collections. Kazakhstan doesn't fabricate, doesn't manufacture trucks. Ukraine does, Uzbekistan does, Germany manufactures a lot of trucks, so does Belarus and so does Russia. But Kazakhstan has very high taxes for some reason. And for example, in 2017, we had 10,000 trucks. In 2020, we have 7,500 trucks. And it's not because we became poorer, but it is because the cost of a truck went up. And we believe this is a little bit unfair with regards to our transporters. The transportation industry, you have to understand that the transportation industry is the industry that exists everywhere. It exists in all the spheres of production and all the spheres of our life. We see transportation. And today, I think our children cannot go to school without a car. They also use cars. They use all sorts of transportation. But Kazakhstan doesn't have a ministry of transportation. That makes us feel sad. Transportation is a very important industry, and we hope that Kazakhstan should have a transportation industry and which should have its own ministry. Now, I would like to show you another table. Table number 3. Once again, we're going to talk about our trailers or trucks. And we're going to show you what taxes exist in the primary registration system. You see in Russia and Belarus and Lithuania, they don't have this concept of primary registration. Kazakhstan does. We have over 5 years, up to 5 years, up to 2 years, but we still have it. And we discussed this with the Minister of Economy for a long time. The Minister of Economy says that stimulates you to buy new vehicles. Okay, we feel that. That's the first position. The second position is that this primary registration goes into the country budget, but we also understand that our children need kindergartens and schools, and I think this is where our money is used, and we totally support that, but we're a little bit jealous looking at our neighboring countries. Why don't they have this? Let's move on. Table number 4. This is an overview table for you to see, for example, in Germany. Let's take Germany. Mercedes, MAN, or let's take Sweden, Volvo and Scania. They don't have this concept of utilities fees, and Lithuania doesn't have that. Ukraine doesn't have that either, but it's a very minor amount. Uzbekistan doesn't have it. But in Kazakhstan, there is a huge amount of the fee that we have to pay. In the Republic of Belarus, Euro 6 is exempt from taxes. There are no taxes. They don't pay that. Kazakhstan doesn't have this concept of Euro 6. There are a lot of small, unclear discrepancies that we want to show to our ministry, to our prime minister, that transportation is working outside of the Republic of Kazakhstan, pretty much. We work from China to Europe. Kazakhstan, it takes 3 days to drive through Kazakhstan, and we practically use the ecology of neighboring countries. We are not working inside the country. We are taking cargo from China to Europe. And the Europeans are paying us money, and this money is brought back to Kazakhstan, but we're making money out there in China, in Russia. We're making money in the countries where we go to, and we take cargo back to Kazakhstan. We would like to understand how this complies and is compatible with our geopolitical positions. And I think I pressed something wrong. Well, let's go back to table number 1. So if you look at this table, you can see the percentage that is charged on top of our fixed assets. If it's up to 2 years, it's 30%. Between 2 and 3 years, it's 44%. From 3 to 5 years, it's 56%. And over 5 years, it's 109% of the value. That is a percentage that's calculated on the fixed assets. And transportation that we buy is a fixed asset, which we use to work and operate. So this is a factory that cannot work without machines. How do you build a factory without machines and not buy the machines? How do you build automobile base without buying fixed assets and main assets? If they become more expensive, then we're becoming incompetitive in this area. And that's why we believe that Kazakhstan, as a member of WTO, should not put extra taxes on us and charge extra taxes. I think it should be according to the investment program. You need to support small and medium businesses and enterprises. Am I still within time? Yes, you have 5 minutes. Now, I would like to say a few words about our internal competition. In foreign competition, we cannot compete with the Belarusians. Belarusians come to Kazakhstan, they open their joint stock companies and take our position. And I hope we're going to get better with this, and the situation is going to get better for Kazakhstan. I also hope so. So let's talk about our internal competition. There is a system of importation for private entities or individuals to bring trucks. So these individuals bring trucks from China, which are not up to standard. They're cheaper. They are Euro 5 or not Euro 5, though that's a little unclear. That's unseen, and introduce a stricter control, because it has to do with the environment. Because we're living in Kazakhstan, and the environment for Kazakhstan plays an important role. And then these vehicles take more cargo, they ruin our roads, they damage our roads. And I don't want to get into details, but I think a little bit of critics, and I think Kanat is here as well. He will talk about it in greater detail. But I think this is it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Saktaganov. Thank you. I'd like to turn the floor to Kanat Makushev, the Deputy General Director of Kazlogistics. And he's going to be talking about how to work with government agencies and on the support of domestic carriers. And right away, Kanat, I would like to ask you a question. How do you assess and value the state of operations of transportation companies and the industry itself, and how the interaction between the industry and state authorities. We don't have the Ministry of Transportation and Communications. Who do you work with? Thank you for your question. I am glad to greet everyone and welcome all the participants of the roundtable. But during my presentation, I am going to answer your question during my presentation, Chandos. So the agenda of, I'm going to talk in my presentation, I'm going to talk about the problem of development of international transportations and working with state authorities and to provide support to domestic transportation companies. I'd like to give you some facts. The international transportation in Kazakhstan started developing in 1992. Based on the small companies with small fleet of 1 to 5 vehicles. Between 96 and 2009, the vehicle fleet of international transporters went up by 22 folds and reached 6,000 units. Over this period of time, for Kazakhstani transporters, we created a legal frame based on 50 international agreements, out of which 40 are bilateral and 10 are multilateral. As you all know, today the number of vehicles, operating vehicles that work using the NTP system is about 7,200 units. So between 2009 and 2020, or in the 13-year period, the growth was 1,200 units. If you look at the years, so 92 units every year. The fleet was increasing by 92 units every year. So in discussing to answer your question, the issue of the state and conditions of the vehicle fleet and upgrades of that fleet have been discussed for a number of years using different platforms. But as you all know, that's the Ministry of Industry and Infrastructure Development, the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs of Kazakhstan, the Committee of Logistics and Transportation at the Presidium of the Atomican, and the Committee of Automobile Transportation of this committee. The questions of the necessity to develop the capacities of the transportation complex were discussed on the 14th of February 2019 by the central apparatus of the Nuratan Party. On the 21st of June 2019, the problematic issue of development of transportation have been considered by the Senate of the Parliament with the involvement of the Union and industry associations at the roundtable dedicated to discussion of perspectives of transportation in the light of effective development of transportation economy of the country as part of implementation of the address of the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. As a result, we developed a comprehensive plan of forecasting of this industry or sector up until 2030 as part of this implementation of this plan. And this year, there was a meeting, Security Council meeting of the Republic of Kazakhstan that discussed the transportation issues, where we heard about the status of current transportation companies, and we discussed the issue of their improving their competitiveness, specifically for abolishment of utility fees for trailers weighing from 12 to 50 tons. In September of this year, we had a meeting of the Committee of the Budget and of the Senate of the Parliament of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and the visit to the Almaty Oblast, where government officials and business community representatives went out to the Almaty Oblast to see how the customs legislation is being implemented on this site, based on the Nurzali border crossing site. Because of the difficulties of the border crossing between Kazakhstan and China, and
mentioned the strategy for truck and passenger cars development till the period of 2020, the state program of Belarus on development of transportation, and recently, as Maksar Dmitrievich mentioned, the presidential decree of Belarusian president on the measures to develop international transportation from Belarus that stimulate the upgrade of the fleet up to the Euro 6 environmental class. The government of Uzbekistan, our neighbors, took a decision to exempt till the end of 2020 from the utilization fee of the cars, new cars, as well as cars as old as 4 years old. That way, the absence of a strategy or a program for development and upgrade of fleet prevents the freight forwarders from developing, from growing, from upgrading their fleets, reduces their competitiveness, and prevents them from ensuring the due upgrade of the fleet. However, alongside the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, on the 10th of July 2021, during the extended governmental session, has instructed and gave 10 recommendations to improve the national policy in the field of international freight forwarding, including to address the issue of utilization or disposal fee. To this end, the ministry is developing a roadmap which will include the seen from the disposal fee. And it may be considered that actually Ministry of Environment is the one responsible for collection of the fee. However, it is believed that actually this disposal fee is a contribution for the budget of the vehicle manufacturing industry. If you look at the Russian example, then they do have a special system on the federal executive authorities, and that system includes the Ministry of Transport of Russian Federation, as well as the Federal Service of Control in the field of transportation, Rostransnadzor, and so on. Each of the agencies carries out its own specific functions. That the Ministry of Transportation of Russia has two functions. The one is to develop the state policy in the field of transport and transportation. The second one is to come up with normative regulatory documents. The Rostransnadzor carries out the supervision and control in this field. One of the areas, one of the direction of state regulation and of the Ministry of Transport and Communication in Belarus, for instance, is the automobile transport, including the activity of legal entities and individual entrepreneurs who carry out transportation and freight forwarding activities, who provide works and services related to passenger transportation, cargo transportation, servicing and maintenance of transportation means and cars and vehicles, the research, the training, and awareness campaigns and other activities related to this field. That way, Kazakhstan is lacking a central body that would be entrusted with developing a centralized strategy in the field of transport and transportation. Therefore, establishing a separate Ministry of Transportation is deemed necessary. Then such a ministry could regulate the development of transport and logistics sector and could protect and lobby the interests of transporters and forwarders and logistic companies, both inside and outside of Kazakhstan. While speaking of the problems of the local and international freight forwarders, and I would like to mention the following. When the transit capacities need to be increased, when there are goals related to increasing of the transport, it is necessary to improve and upgrade the fleet of trucks and trails. In Kazakhstan, there are more than 4,000 trucks registered, 16,000 trucks transport the fleet inside and outside of the country. And as I know that more than 7,000 cars have permits of accessing the European markets. The amortization of the international freight forwarders fleet is 70%, and the exploitation have negative impact. It leads to increased expenses related to fuel and spare parts. The technical maintenance gets more expensive, and actually they get obsolete, and their competitiveness thereby decreases as well. The international transportation, if you look at the Russian Federation, there are more than 50,000 vehicles in Belarus, 38,000 vehicles. In Lithuania, international freight forwarding accumulates 6% of GDP, generates 6% of GDP, and make the fleet of about 40,000 cars. The union believes that the upgrading the fleet and enhancing the fleet needs to be a priority, and it's something that needs to deserve the support when it comes to export and import sectors. However, the efficiency and importance of the extensive support to the local freight forwarders is not being noticed. And those issues where the support is needed, those are the supporting the freight forwarders, protecting the, again, discrimination, protecting the lobby, dumping, and so on. When it comes, in fact, our freight forwarders have to compete for their share in the international market with the Asian and European transporters. And when they sometimes provide services to the international companies. And all the money then goes to Kazakhstan. All the taxes are paid in Kazakhstan. And so is generated the GDP. So is GDP generated. We're still unable to deliver to the state agency that upgrading the fleet is beneficial for the freight forwarders as well as for the state as well. And actually, as an example, I can give you a very short quote. One cargo car makes about $10,000 through one round trip. Given that one car in a year makes 10 routes, 10 trips, that amount in a year, in 1 year, will make about $100,000. So if we assume that we increase the fleet by 5,000 cargo trucks, then that will increase the cumulative revenue by $500,000, and that will indirectly affect creation of new jobs and will directly again create revenues for the national budget. Considering all of this, the union offers to increase the fleet by 5,000 units that will be working with international freight forwarding and cargo distribution. That will help Kazakhstan generate about $500 million US and about 1 billion tenge to the national budget. Secondly, to adopt a local program of financing the local businesses, to enabling them and helping them to buy trucks, refrigerators, trailers, and independent trailers, and with an interest rate of no more than 3%, and to reduce the coefficient of disposal fee down to 5%, especially for the vehicles that were operated at the standards of Euro 6 with a mass of 10 to 50 tons. Thank you very much, Mr. Mukushev, for your very interesting information, for very interesting presentation. Well, dear viewers, dear audience, now I'd like to give floor to Vladimir Stepchenko, head of Alem Transgop LLP, and he will speak about the business opinion about existing realities and personal experience. Could you please connect, Mr. Stepchenko? Good day. Good day, colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity. My presentation will be very, very brief, and it will probably resonate with the previous speech by Mr. Mukushev. Yes, truly, we are suffering from very serious difficulties related to upgrade of the fleet due to some unclear taxes, tax collection, as well as disposal fee. We do see some significant problems related to competition because we have to compete against the freight forwarders from Belarus, from Poland, from the Baltic countries, such as Lithuania, actually our key rival to that end. And unfortunately, our situation is not fair. I mean, we are not in equitable condition. Mr. Maksatov has mentioned a table in the beginning, and you see that the disposal fee for some types of the vehicles is up to 100 million tenge. So if you calculate that amount in euros, then you understand that's about 12,000 euro to dispose of a car. So if you take the European freight forwarder, for this amount of money, the European freight forwarder can buy a whole car, a whole new truck, and can easily bring his cargo to Kazakhstan without any obstacles or difficulties. Buying a trailer is about 5,000 or 6,000 euros. So one fee, the disposal fee, means one extra vehicle for international transporter. We find ourselves in an absolutely discriminating position. We cannot compete with our colleagues, with our competitors, and unfortunately, the situation has been like this for many years. Also, Mr. Mukushev quoted some interesting figures about the weighted share of the national transporters in the international transportation. Actually, in 2016, this amount dropped from 52% down to 31% only. This is official statistics only. But if we do a more thorough analysis, then I'm sure that the lowest point will be even lower than that. We do have lots of gaps in terms of control. We do have some, gray areas. Our recommendations are not always heard, are not always perceived, and it is still now that we're trying to recover that joint order, ensuring transport control at completion of the customs procedure, similar to what they have in Kyrgyz Republic. We can see that actually many of the freight forwarders avoiding our control arrive to Kazakhstan without tri-party permits. And this number, nobody really knows what this number means. I mean, how many of those freight forwarders do that? So I'm sure it's not 31%. It's much lower than that if we look at the cargo entering Kazakhstan. Our recommendations are the following. We propose that we look at Uzbekistan as a role model. And if we see what has been done in Uzbekistan to support their national transportation companies and freight forwarding companies, then the measures were very effective and very specific. For instance, they have introduced a compensation to cover the expenses related to loans in the amount of 25%. The Cabinet of Ministers has instructed to provide abandoned buildings, abandoned territories, to use them as bus depot, as cars, as fleet depot, for free, in fact. They built a MAN factory in 2019 that manufactures new trucks, and actually Uzbek transporters are actively using the products of that factory. A lot has been done. Actually, disposal fee was lifted till 2021 for all the cars, for all the cargos. The customs fee was fully lifted for the trucks which are imported for the purposes of cargo transportation, of freight forwarding. So if our state, if our country will decide to pay attention to our freight forwarders and will develop specific measures to support us, then I'm sure that we will cope with the need to upgrade the fleet, and that way the weighted share of our participation, of our contribution to international transportation will reach the planned numbers. We planned these numbers, right? However, we're going in an opposite direction. In 2021, we're supposed to have 53%, but we seem to be going backwards. And I think it's time to look the truth in the eyes and take some measures. Thank you very much, Vladimir Stepchenko. Well, dear participants, dear audience, now I'd like to give the floor to Pavel Tilitsyn, the head of AT Logistics LLP. Pavel will also speak about his personal understanding, his personal viewpoint of how the transportation sector is developing in Kazakhstan. Please connect to Mr. Tilitsyn. Hello and welcome. Good day, distinguished colleagues and friends. Well, I would like to give a wider perspective of our problems. Well, Kazakhstan is located at a transit part between China, Russia, and Western Europe and Northern Europe. The cargo flows are increasing, and the GDP of many countries are growing. And this is a colossal opportunity, a colossal interest that we do have. You remember the Suez was blocked. The Gulf was blocked by a big tanker, and the whole got stuck, and everything got stalled. Actually, Kazakhstan has an advantage because we are located along that route on the very convenient side. However, the problem is that the transport infrastructure is not developing, and that we see that actually we do have lots of crossing with China, but actually exiting China, sometimes there is no even proper roads, proper motor roads that would take the trucks out to the country. And this is not accessible. This is not admissible, really. And we are not on the right tracks, it seems. I propose we discuss the problem of the transport development in a global perspective. We do need to develop the transit that happens at the moment between China, Western Europe, and Russia. We need to build big hubs at China's Kazakh cross-border points. We need to create and establish special economic zones similar to what China has. And in fact, with transit tax collection, we can generate up to tens and tens of millions of dollars, and that will be more than oil and gold and everything all together. But what is lacking, actually, this is new policy. We do need new thinking. The first president of Kazakhstan has paid attention to the situation that we do need to develop the Silk Road, and we began speaking about, and somehow it just got lost into all this conversation. And I think we need to we need to restore the Ministry of Transportation. We need to develop the transport policy in the field of transit specifically. Actually, my friends, my colleagues, I agree with them. We need to work on international transit, and we will need the huge amount of new trucks for international transportation. All of indirect taxes needs to be removed. Not in a single world you will find that kind of indirect taxes. In order to make money, in order to open an enterprise, you first need to buy the machinery, you need to buy the trucks, and you need to start working. However, in our case, before buying any truck, you need to pay 100% fee, 100% tax. And I think it is related to misunderstanding or lack of understanding. And they believe that the more taxes are imposed, the higher the tax rate, the bigger the budget is going to be. But this is absolutely erroneous opinion. And I think in this very situation, we need a global concept for the transport development of Kazakhstan in a global policy, in the world policy, with international experts, with some global leading professionals. And then this policy would drive the building of motor roads, not two-lane motor road. Actually, we did some calculation with our investors, and we can send up to 1,000 trucks through the border points with China. And for that, we need 16-lane motor roads, not two-lane motor roads. And I believe that we need to have evidence-based concept for development of transport potential of Kazakhstan. And it is with this note I would like to conclude my presentation and draw your attention to all the above-mentioned statements. Thank you very much, Mr. Tilitsyn. We do have another person connected to us via online from Uzbekistan, representative of the International Freight Forwarders of Uzbekistan, RCUs, Dmitry Chubenko. Hello, dear colleagues. I hope you can hear me well and everything's fine. Hello. Well, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to participate in this event. I would like to thank and wish all the guests and all the participants a very fruitful work. And when it comes to my presentation, then I would like to give you and present several programs that we do have in Uzbekistan when it comes to supporting international freight forwarding and international transportation. I was listening to the previous speakers, and I would like to draw your attention to the following aspect. I think it's key, it's really crucial, and it's important, and I think we need to clearly understand it. The thing is that the issue of transportation is clearly, very important, because transport is a connecting element of the economy, and without transport, you cannot supply or maintain industry or any other sectors of the economy. But in any case, transportation is the service sector, belong to the service sector. It either services the industries in terms of shipping cargo, or it services the passengers in terms of transporting and carrying the passengers. And to that end, we always need to think in a very comprehensive manner to make sure that transportation meets the capacity in terms of industrial capacity and passenger flow, booster capacity. In Uzbekistan, for many years, we had these very comprehensive programs which are interconnected.
And they look not just at the development of transportation as a standalone sector that's not related to other sectors of economy, but from the standpoint of providing transportation, or by providing the needs for the needs of other growing sectors of economy from the transportation sector. And our colleagues from Kazakhstan already gave an example of certain our programs. The vehicles that we use to transport cargoes, they're tax exempt or exempt from some fees now and in the future. They're exempt from customs fees, from disposal fee. They're exempt from excise fees, which was collected in the past, and now the only fee that they have to pay is VAT, and I think it's a customs fee for paperwork arrangement, but it's a very minor percentage from the total cost of the cargo. And what's important is that transportation is supported in parallel to the growing economy, and by that we're relating to a strategic task of making sure that transportation has to constantly support the growing sectors of economy aimed at, for example, development of export of fruit and vegetables. We have certain regulations that provide for an increase of vehicles, specifically for transportation of perishable goods, including refrigerator trucks, so semi-trailers and trailers, and cars. And the Republic of Uzbekistan has achieved a lot in the last 5 years in this area, and this program's demonstrated their effectiveness, proved their effectiveness. So if we talk briefly about the situation, just in a few words, this is the part that I would like to share with you. And if you have any questions, I would like to entertain them. I have a question, Dmitry. The topic of your presentation is experience of Uzbekistan and providing state support for replenishment or upgrade of the national fleet of transportation companies. Could you tell us how do you value or evaluate the probable forecast and the increase of the market or the growth of the market of transportation shipments in Uzbekistan, or vehicle shipments in Uzbekistan? Do you have any forecasts right now? Well, like I said, we had a number of programs, specific programs, strategic programs, which had specific targets and parameters for different years. For example, we had in 2017, we adopted a program on development of the transportation sector, including vehicles and automobile transportation for up to 2021. This year, as far as I know, there were certain resolutions that extend certain benefits for up until 2025, and they contain several forecast indicators, which, according to which the state, public, and private sectors try to achieve up to a certain point in time. As far as I know, to date, by the end of 2021, we are exceeding this forecast already. Can you give us numbers? If we talk about, for example, our association, because I'm representing a private, my association of international transporters of Uzbekistan, so I'm not going to be speaking on behalf of state authorities. I'm not authorized to give any numbers, but from the association, I can tell you that in 2017, for example, the number of transportation companies that use the NDP system, so-called NDP holders, was 280, and now it's over 1,000. And we're talking about companies. If we talk about a fleet, it has increased several folds since 2017. So it's over more than three folds. And I think that gives you an idea of the effect this government support programs had. And once again, just to emphasize, these programs are clearly tied to other sectors of economy, such as export of fruits and vegetables, construction industry, and so on and so forth. So we're considering a set of issues comprehensively, because like our colleagues from Kazakhstan said correctly, and they were right in doing so, they have a very tough competition within one EU market. And this is a very clear situation where national transporters from Uzbekistan are also competitors of Kazakh transportation companies, for example, Belarusian companies, Russian companies, etc. But we need to understand the following. Before you win over competition on the global market or the regional market, wherever, we have to look at the level of satisfaction of our own needs. This is what if we talk about the internal economy, this is what the internal economy is, or economy of Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan in this case, is asking for, and to what extent we as transportation companies can comply with the development that we're experiencing locally. And only after that we have to look at the regional or global markets, because there are a lot of other factors, such as the permit systems, systems of permits, or the openness of neighboring borders between neighboring countries. For example, the closure of Turkmenistan's border during the pandemic played a significant role and affected us significantly, as an example. So at first, we have to look at our own capacity and then look at bigger numbers. So as far as I understand, if I understand correctly, this comprehensive and system-based regular work is conducted thanks to the fact that Uzbekistan has direct regulator in the person of the Ministry of Transportation, correct? Yes, thank you. Larissa? Yes, Larissa has a question. Are you still online with us, Dmitry? Yes, I am here. So, Dmitry, question to you. Could you please tell us, you're manufacturers of trucks in Uzbekistan. Are there any benefits, and are they different between vehicles that are domestically made or imported from other countries for buyers, for local buyers? It's pretty straightforward. The MAN factory that was mentioned earlier, that is located in Samarkand and does manufacture trailers and tugs and semi-trailers, trailers, etc. When it was built, there was a line, production line, to make an X number of vehicles. You have to understand that it makes not just vehicles to be used for international transportation, but also specialized vehicles of different types, such as excavators, vehicles that are used in servicing cities, and so on and so forth. And when we looked at this issue, specifically under the programs of the support of national transportation companies in terms of increase of the national fleet, it contained a certain spectrum or range of things. For example, there is a lobby of national manufacturers of vehicles, but also there's a question of capacities and abilities to manufacture a sufficient number of vehicles that is required by the market. And you have to understand that to date, to answer your question, we have programs that support leasing. For example, more affordable leasing for national transportation companies and procurement of this new equipment from the manufacturer. And these programs are different. They vary. They include programs that were developed jointly with Germany for importation of equipment, old equipment, but still in a very good condition. That doesn't exceed 3 to 5 years of operations after they've been manufactured. And there are special lines which MAN allocates to make sure that their equipment is bought, their vehicles are bought. There are programs like that. But at the same time, they do not overlap. They don't undermine the programs that are aimed at supporting transportation companies in breeding other vehicles from European countries, other European countries, because the demand for transportation is exceeding. And it's developing very highly because the economy is expanding, it's growing, and we have to keep up with this growth and this pace. And with that regards, there is no contradiction between the fact that we have national manufacturers and we also import vehicles at beneficial prices. There's no contradiction in that. So, Dmitry, thank you very much. Stay with us. We have already have questions from our online participants, and in the end of our session, we will, after all the presentations, we will definitely ask you these questions. And Larisa Kislikova, the chairwoman of the Dialogue Platform Partnership for Transportation and Logistics in Central Asia. Please, Larisa, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear participants. Yes, the problem that is discussed during today's roundtable is very relevant, and specifically the supply of new vehicles. And I am representing a partnership. This is a regional dialogue platform, which includes over 100 transportation companies and some associations. And quite often we discuss these issues in every country individually. And I am from Tajikistan, and I am well aware of these issues related to transportation in Tajikistan. Our colleagues were saying that the main competition comes from transportation companies from Russia, from Belarus. And for our transportation companies in Tajikistan, the biggest competition comes from Kazakhstan. But that's good, maybe, for you to hear such news. But nonetheless, that's the case. And that also has to do with the fact that we have the permitless system with Kazakhstan, not just for importation, exportation, and transit, but also importation of produce and goods from third countries, which is also very important. As for the availability of transportation vehicles and the number of transportation companies, that's incomparable with what you have in your countries. And for example, several years ago, I worked in the International Automobile Transportation companies, the BAT Association. So the system that is used by the holders of NTP books, there were only 20 companies that were registered in that system. That's nothing. That's the new companies that are being created. Quite often they're registered with, but they have no vehicles on their balance. So they work with contractors, subcontractors, private entrepreneurs. The question of access to funding to procure new vehicles, that's a big issue. There high interest rates plus VAT, customs fees, and duties, despite the fact that we don't have a domestic production. So we have 25% of the interest rate, plus VAT and duties and fees. Comes up to almost 50% of the cost of the truck in taxes. That's a very high burden. That's why cars that are imported are very old. A couple of years ago, we ran an experiment where we exempted the transportation companies. We gave a 50% discount on the import fee, and the statistics shows that only 2 or 3 cars were imported. So the government says, what's the point of reducing taxes if there's no importation? But there is a different thing here. Where do we take money to buy these vehicles? Similar, once we've were able to set very good relations with Uzbekistan. A credit line was issued to buy Uzbek-made vehicles at a low interest rate. But once the agreement started going through the banks, the interest rate went to 20-25%. So pretty much, the data, so the loans that were issued were not used, or were offered were not used. So that's a big problem. And I heard about your experience, and you said talked about the programs that work in Uzbekistan. We have a lot to learn, but at the same time, nonetheless, competing is very difficult. The vehicle fleet of refrigerator fleet today doesn't reach 75 or 80 units. That's very little. Our exporters don't want to, or very reluctant to use local transportation companies because they have old vehicles that are not equipped with navigation systems that allow you to track vehicles en route, and they prefer to use Russian, Belarusian, and Kazakhstani transportation companies. Now we're seeing more Uzbekistani transportation companies coming to the market. So people willing to work on our market. There are a lot of people willing to work in our market, but I think we should not compete because we're all looking at the Eurasian Union, and if we get there, what's going to happen then when we're going to be all under the same union? And I think we all think that there's not going to be any competition, but the reality shows that it does exist even within one union. So there are a lot of problems that we have to tackle together. And we have the Ministry of Transportation. And Uzbekistan, they created the ministry before they had the agency, and then they was converted to the ministry. But I hope that this joining of efforts or structured and industry-based agencies will help us tackle these issues. In terms of the private to public dialogue, we created a very good structure that's called a public council that gathers or meets 4 times a year. It is attended by a lot of players in the market. They talk about their problems, they find common solutions, but I should give a merit to the fact that the transportation companies during meetings like that, they don't talk about their problems. The minister meets with them. They're saying, so what is the problem? No, we're all fine. Everything's good. But when at platforms like this, informal platforms where a lot of problems are raised, there are a lot of problems are raised there, but nobody, the transportation companies don't want to talk about it probably because of the fear of the consequences. When they try to obtain some documents or permits or whatever, they will be prohibited from doing so. So we're focusing on associations that should protect their members, should talk about this, should speak out loud. And our partnership that was created for this purpose, we're actively participating in national committees on simplification of trade procedures, where we speak on behalf of all the transportation companies. We raise these issues, discuss these issues, and slowly we are tackling them. But we'll continue and try and solve these issues. Thank you. Thank you very much, Larissa. I have a question to you. Your assessment on the top of your head. On an annual, how much money do transportation companies of Tajikistan lose in terms of their revenues, given the fact that your market is very attractive for foreign companies? Off the top of your head, if we look at I cannot say that it is very attractive. The main export capacity is aluminum and cotton, export commodities. In the past, it was transported via rail. Now it's all via road transportation and fresh agricultural produce. I would say approximately about 50 to 60% we lose in revenues. That's a very high percentage of losses, as far as I understand, and that makes it more complicated to upgrade the fleet, up to 75%. Yes, given the fact that you have direct regulator, the Ministry of Transportation and Communications, they don't have fleet. They don't have a fleet. So that's the infrastructural problems, right? As far as I understand, infrastructural problems as well. There are no large transportation companies that would go out to the market. Like I said, the maximum number of vehicles that a company has is 10 units, which are very obsolete. That's one thing, that there's no access to funding or finance, and they work regardless of the regulator that determines the transportation policy. They try to stay afloat. Another question, I believe that it actually pertains to all the countries that are that participate in our forum, Larissa, the recent events in the region, and we were a little bit tense about a month and a half ago. So could you tell us, what do you think of the status of automobile roads in the Republic of Tajikistan? Because it's not a secret that the transportation infrastructure and the transportation industry are directly linked to provision of the national security in any country, and Tajikistan is not an exception in this case. So what do you think of that? Let me tell you, one of the strategic objectives of Tajikistan was to exit the communication dead end. So during the Soviet Union, we were connected to Uzbekistan only, and then from Uzbekistan on. But in the last 30 years of independence, we got out of this communication dead end. Those who visited Tajikistan can confirm that we have very good roads and that were constructed and built with the technical assistance of international development organizations, and because of the border to China, because of the high altitude, which is over 4,500 meters above sea level, and they have. They're still working on that road, and the Asian Development Bank funded the road through to Uzbekistan. So we have very good infrastructure. That's why we're saying that we have infrastructure. We're out of the dead end. We have to start focusing on the actual transportation vehicles to be able to understand the quality of transportations.
Thank you so much. And with this, we are finalizing the part of the presentation. And now we have time for Q&A session. And so I would like to ask the online speakers who are attending or who are participating via Zoom to be attentive. Please stay close to your computers and gadgets. Most likely you will to have questions to answer. And we do have a question from Edina Nuralieva from Kazakhstan, Edina Nuralieva, who is asking, why can't we introduce toll roads for all transit trucks? Because they all use our roads. Why not? Why not introduce the toll roads? Well, they are being introduced in Kazakhstan. Mr. Takataganov is answering, is replying, yes. I mean, they're for all. I mean, it doesn't matter whether your car is registered in Kazakhstan or outside of Kazakhstan. We all have to pay for a road. So that's a fee, right, for using the road. Yes, when crossing the border. Also, there is a fee. So the system is there and the money is being collected. And yes, it is being introduced. And actually, the toll roads are expanding. Yes. Okay, if... then I would like to build on that question. These fees, how do they get distributed? How do they get structured? How do they get spent? Well, they collected, or they sent to the national budget, and then they're spent to restore and to rebuild the roads. Why I'm asking? In December last year, I was in Atarau region, and I had to, travel across the region, and the destinations, or kind of the, not roads, but motor roads towards Russia, towards Uralsk, is in a very poor condition. And you said that the money are spent and are invested in infrastructural development of the roads as well. And what is the problem? Why can't we build the high quality and good roads despite all these fees that are being collected? Well, we are a big state. We do have many, many roads. And recovering them instantaneously is not easy. And it wasn't by chance that Soviet Union has been restoring this road via Kyrgyz. In fact, the whole Soviet Union has pulled to do this. The road was there, but we did it. And now the new big sort of roads are being built, but they will be toll roads. It's not as fast as you want it to be. But do you believe that if we bring back the Ministry of Transport and Communication in Kazakhstan, could we more effectively address these issues? Of course, it will be the ministry. It will be an individual, separate ministry of transport. It will have its own budget, and all the budget, hopefully, will be designed in a way to restore all transport channels and transport communications. That will be the right thing to do because it is the name of the ministry, right? The Ministry of Transportation. Thank you. And another question. Please do connect Dmitry from Uzbekistan. I think the question is for you, Dmitry. What is the transportation cooperation with Turkmenistan? What are the most effective control points between Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan? If you could answer this question, and Mr. Taganov offer his comments afterwards. Thank you. That's a good question, really. All the participants sitting here and representing the different associations or freight forwarders or representatives of private sector, those who are aware with the situation about with Turkmenistan knows that for almost a year, almost 18 months, Turkmenistan is de facto closed for a normal transit, whether entry or exit, due to the measures, the so-called anti-COVID measures or anti-pandemic, anti-COVID-19 pandemic measures. And it finds its manifestation that if an international forwarder and his or her driver cannot enter Turkmenistan and cannot leave the cargo and collect another cargo and take it to another country or even transit the country, is unable to do so. And it is all based on a driver substitution or driver replacement principle, or the trail will have to be reloaded, transshipped. So we have Balat on our side, Farat on the Turkmenistan side, and Bukhara region. We have this control point. It goes along Amudarya River. There is the bridge on Turkmen side via Amudarya River. So it's not that easy. So de facto, answering this question as to how the cooperation is going in Turkmenistan, there is no normal, let me underscore this once again, there is no normal cooperation as far as I know. And I don't think we are the only country who doesn't have any cooperation with Turkmenistan. I think other countries of Central Asia have similar position here. Thank you. Mr. Saktaganov, if you could comment on this, or what do we as Kazakhstan think about this? Or our colleague from Uzbekistan was quite right that Turkmenistan is sealed, is closed, but we can enter via Mangustau. We do have a crossing there. We leave our half a trail. They hook it up to their truck. They take it to Ashgabat at a destination. They kind of offload it and then bring it back to the same crossing point. Or, like it's been mentioned, the driver substitution, driver replacement. We either use leave a half a trail there or leave a whole truck there, and then they regulate it themselves. There is also a Turkmenistani seaport that also accepts cargoes from Kazakhstan with a similar replacement of semi-trail, half-trail. Thank you. The next question was asked in Kazakh. I will read it out, and then I will translate it into Russian. So in Kazakhstan, why was the Ministry of Transport and Communication closed in Kazakhstan? Why was the road police merged with the administrative police? So the translation into Russian goes now that why was the ministry closed in Kazakhstan? And the second question was about the merger of the vehicle or motor road police and administrative police. Well, actually, given my moderator's powers, I would like to cancel the second question because it doesn't relate to the topic of the forum. It doesn't relate to the topic of our discussion. Mr. Taktagan, what was the ministry? What pushed what triggered the closure of the Ministry of Transportation? During Soviet times, you will remember that we had the Ministry of Motor Roads, so we had the Ministry of Motor Transport. And the Ministry of Motor Transport was the one merged with the Ministry of Motor Roads. It was then merged into one structure called Kazavtojol. There were a few more ministries, like Ministry of Industry, Ministry of, some other ministries. There was the Ministry of Communication, and there was this whole restructuring happening. And right now we do have this Ministry of industry infrastructural development. So the government must have seen the whole logic in merging or kind of bringing many aspects under one umbrella, and we have this what we have, and sort of a puzzle, right? And something that you're trying to brush up and to turn into the initial state. So we do have another question. I would like to make a small comment, a technical comment. The participants, please do remember that the working languages of this forum are Russian and English, and please abstain from asking your questions in Kazakh. So please be respectful of that fact. Be mindful of that fact. The question from Murat Amrin, Atomic and National Chamber of Entrepreneurs. A question addressed to Dmitry. Dmitry, if we could see you on the screen now, it is the following question. The positive and negative implications for Uzbek transportation companies are being considered. Are they being considered provided Uzbekistan joins Eurasian Economic Union? And if so, then could you list the main of those benefits and shortcomings or drawbacks of joining the union? Well, thank you. The issue of joining or accession to Eurasian Economic Union is a very difficult, it's a very complex question, it has many layers. And in order to unpack this question, to answer the question, I will have to look at the global picture. But since I'm a representative of an association, then I actually would express our opinion as an association. And so I will share my view as a view of transportation sector. Well, we don't see any positive implications for our freight forwarders if Uzbekistan was to join Eurasian Economic Union. In fact, we very thoroughly analyzed this set of questions, but in general, inside the Eurasian Economic Union, Eurasian Economic Union is not a homogeneous union. I mean, similar to any integration union. We do have the manufacturers or service providers, service consumers, and they need to be ideally a balance between the service producers and the service consumers, and that way they all will mutually receive all the benefits, all the bonuses as a result of such unification, or it's called the win-win strategy, right? From the transportation point of view, if we are to join the Eurasian Economic Union, then the Kazakhstan's freight forwarders, Kyrgyz freight forwarders, and Uzbek freight forwarders, and Russian freight forwarders, and Belarusian freight forwarders will be in a more competitive environment than they are at the moment, because the market that is slightly isolated or separated, I'm talking about the Uzbek market, if it exceeds or joins the Eurasian Economic Union, it will be a part of a bigger territory, and then we will be inside the Eurasian Economic Union, and we will be competing for the main routes and for the main supply chains. We do believe that for this sector, everyone will lose if we join, if Uzbekistan will join the Eurasian Economic Union. From the transportation point of view, from the transportation sector point of view, there are many directions of the Eurasian Economic Union are not beneficial to all. I mean, if we look Belarus, for instance, the Belarusian transportation companies, they serve and they service the section of the road connecting the Eurasian Economic Union and the European countries. At the moment, Russia and Kazakhstan are developing their transportation routes with China, and they have their own competition to that end, happening to that end. So, and to wrap up, inside the Eurasian Economic Union, the competition will be excessive, and it will be very intense. And the main issue there, the main price for the competition will be not for inside the European Union, but for outside of the European Union. Okay, there is a follow-up question to you, Dmitry. Is Turkmenbashi seaport in demand at the moment? Especially, is it in demand for among Uzbek freight forwarders and in Kazakhstan as well? Mr. Saktaganov, that's a question for you as well. Can you comment whether it is attractive as a transit hub, Dmitry? I cannot tell you if it is very attractive, because There are no conditions to use this port for transit purposes via Turkmenistan exist at the moment. However, the conditions that were created in Uzbekistan with overhaul of a trail and with driver replacement lead to a situation that Turkmenistan, in principle, as a transit corridor, is not being used by our freight forwarders. They use alternative routes, including via Kazakhstan, through Kazakhstan. Thank you. Maksat Abdirovich, Mr. Taganov, what do you think about the Turkmenbashi port? I would like to comment on the previous question. Yeah, there are transport relationships, there are permit system, and if Uzbekistan is to join Eurasian Economic Union, then only after 2025 we will begin working in one uniform union. But until then, the technical regulations will need to be developed. As for Turkmenbashi seaport, we do have our own Aktau seaport, which is very transit-laden or transit-intensive. Turkmenistan is now closed, and now most of the shipments go and via Aktau seaport. I think it's logical to have one own port. Yes, we do have Kurik seaport, we do have Aktau seaport, we do have a ferry going between Baku and Aktau, and there is another good ferry route going from Aktau to Russia, and so it's developing. If I may, recently we visited the Kurik seaport when we did a survey on alternative routes. It will be also covered in the next sessions. So the thing is that Kazakhstan doesn't have its own ferry. Kazakhstan does not own ferries. The ferries belong to Azerbaijan or to Russia, and that is why the cost of ferry transportation is very high. Also, depending on the weather condition, the waiting time is unpredictable. These are the drawbacks that not only ourselves notice, but Turkmenistan does have its own ferry transportation, and if we use them, it will be cheaper. And actually, if the Turkmenbashi seaport opens up, then it will be cheaper, and maybe then we will use the Turkmenistan as another route as before. And actually, we paid attention to Kurik port for a reason, and especially Uzbek transporters, because that's not container transportation. You can drive in with a car. You actually can pack the whole ferry with everything, and you don't have to, overhaul the trails and everything. So it's the only problem is the price. So actually having the ministry, bringing the ministry back would mean having another ferry fleet. Timur Batirshin has a question about the safety and security of transportation and introduction of ISO 39001 in Kazakhstan and neighboring states, and whether its introduction's impact is being traced. What is the movement and transportation safety? And with introduction of ISO 39001 in Kazakhstan and its neighboring countries, and whether you can track the impact of its introduction. Well, I'm not ready to take this question, frankly. No, this is still work in progress. It is being introduced step by step, but we haven't seen any technical impact, like any tangible impact yet. Larissa? Well, in Tajikistan, this standard was not introduced yet, or was yet to be introduced. Which standard do you use at the moment? Well, the transportation companies do not use any international standards, but only follow technical regulations to enter the Eurasian Economic Union and also respect the regulations of the European Union. But these are the ones who have access to European Union only. Thank you, dear participants. We look forward to your questions. It will be interesting for us to listen to hear your questions, maybe some comments about the situation both in Kazakhstan and the neighboring countries. And in the meantime, while we're still awaiting your question, I would like to ask to bring our speakers back to the geo-economic position and location of Central Asia and Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan in particular. Well, since these are the countries that are present here. What can I say about the following situation? Kazakhstan has one of the longest borderlines, about 5 to 6 kilometers, with Russian Federation. Subsequently, we're located in one economic union at the same time. And this union keeps on expanding all the time. Do you think if we're effectively using our area, our land, and do we really taking advantage of our geographic location? We do have these big neighbors, China and Russian Federation. Are we using it to the full extent? Well, Kazakhstan, in the last 5-7 years after we opened this new corridor, Western Europe, Western China, and the new roads began building. Then we began using more efficiently the transit capacity of the country. This One Belt, One Road, One Belt, One Road initiative that was launched by China is new as well, and there's now new container deliveries in 15 days from the south of China up to Berlin or to Hamburg even. Kazakhstan is very efficiently using the container transportation. There are some good flows going from Aktau seaport to Caucasus. Container transportation, again, are intensifying. Air transportation, air cargo is being used, again, intensively and actively. And I believe that because our partner on one side is Russia and on the other side is China, and the third side is Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, we are in the center of this Eurasian state. We must use our transit capacity to bigger, to better. Belarus, for instance, has only one way to Europe and actually can't go around Brest. You can't simply, and actually they make crazy amounts of money, crazy dough with that one point of transit. I think Kazakhstan has room for development. We need to still work on our transit potential, and I think we need more efforts be invested. Thank you.
Larissa, what do you think about the transit capacity of Tajikistan? And as far as I remember, you also had a very interesting borders, Afghanistan, South Asia, Southern Asia, and thank you very much. When we participate at forums like that, and when we have different countries speaking about saying Kazakhstan is in the best geographic position, Uzbekistan has even better, and Tajikistan has ideal conditions, but we never talk about the region in general. In principle, we're small countries, and China and other countries, in order to be able to transit our countries, we have to act as a region. The transit capacity has to be used, but we have to create conditions for transit to make it comfortable to travel through our country, so there's no theft and the crime on the roads. We have to make sure that we create these conditions. Until the situation in Afghanistan changed, we were actively developing a route through Iran, going to Afghanistan to the seaports of Iran, because this is the shortest distance, and the route was set up, and our transportation company started using it. Although the situation's changed, our vehicles reached Orhan Bardab, and they didn't see any danger. But exporters are worried and concerned about their cargo. That's why there are no shipments between the countries. There are no Pakistani cargoes because warehouses are empty in Pakistan. As for Kulma, that's a different question. The altitude is 4,500 meters. It cannot work all year round because of weather conditions and geographic conditions. However, Chinese cargoes go into Afghanistan. They're effectively transiting the country. They're mainly using Chinese transportation companies and our transportation companies. And last year we did one automobile run, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China. 2 trucks from each country were going in both directions. The Chinese feel totally like home there, but Uzbek transportation companies said they're never going to go there again. So we have to provide a better infrastructure, create conditions, and now our Minister of Transportation plans to come up with this unified permit for Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China to draw this traffic from China, especially from the south of Uzbekistan, not going through Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, but rather going in the south. It's more convenient for them to go via Tajikistan. So there are a lot of proposals. The Minister of Transportation is working on them, but currently the transit went down significantly. It was the transit via Tajikistan to Afghanistan. So we're going to be looking at the infrastructure. The infrastructure allows us to do that in terms of Kyrgyzstan, for example. Plus, we have a two-sided crossing. We won't be able to implement any international transportations. As for the north, it's a multilateral arrangement, but the situation is slightly different. The border with Kyrgyzstan is shut down. So the geopolitics plays a significant role here in this region. Thank you. Dmitry, are you with us? Yes, I'm with you. What do you think about the infrastructural capabilities and geo-economic position of the Republic of Uzbekistan from the standpoint of transit capabilities? Development of the transit capacity was a big focus, both during the rule of the first president and the current president as well. And I can say that, echoing myself again, Uzbekistan, despite the fact that we are a landlocked country or a country with no access to sea, we continue to actively develop multi-module transportations, delivery of cargoes, both by rail and roads. We have to understand, and I totally agree with Larisa Kislikova, that the Central Asian region should, from the standpoint of transportation, should think regionally rather than on the country basis, on the country level. Because word per word, I will just reattest that Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, they all thrive for obtaining or creating certain conditions, benefits, and so on and so forth to make sure that the cargo going from China towards Europe, for example, would pass or go into Africa or Middle East, go through their countries. But at the same time, had the regional, had we been more connected regionally in terms of transportation, and had we had warmer relations in this area, in this sector, we could offer such conditions that would be beneficial to everyone, and nobody would lose anything using those arrangements. Because when you create competition, when you see competition, on the one hand, undoubtedly everyone's trying to create more and more benefits and provide more and more benefits and conditions, better conditions. But due to geographic locations, from the standpoint of different logistics schemes, and from the standpoint of specifics of the goods that are being transported, or different ports, or availability of different infrastructures, any country would be able to benefit from that to a greater extent than they do right now. So speaking of Uzbekistan, I'd like to emphasize that Uzbekistan does a lot to develop this transit capacity, and we support international transporters. We maintain this ongoing connections with associations of international transporters, not just in the region, countries of Central Asia, but I'm also talking about other countries as well in terms of customs, for example, automobile transportation. We're seeing a huge progress. If we look at the situation 10 years ago and now, it's a huge progress, and both in automobile and road transportation and railroad transportation. And I think that the focus of my presentation should be shifted to the fact that, yes, the region needs to unite. And we need to have more platforms for regional interaction, because I think this is where we're all going to gain and benefit, as opposed to everyone trying to individually pull the blanket to their side. Thank you for your comment, Dmitry. And I would also like to read another question from CTJ. Could you please tell us what the situation is right now with transportation logistics at the Afghanistan border crossing point. Are there any logistics problems in delivering goods and goods to Afghanistan given the current situation? We have one international border crossing point with Afghanistan. That's Nizhny Panch. And the nearest border crossing point from Afghanistan is about 60 kilometers from the border, Sharhan Bardan. This site is open. It works on a regular basis once Taliban came to the power. It hasn't been closed for a single day. And the prices went up a little. Talibs abandoned visa requirements for international transportation companies that made it easier to cross the border. But at the same time, on the other hand, the exporters of goods, and we've been working with transits from China to Afghanistan, and then we were taking our concrete and coal to Afghanistan. So these deliveries stopped for now because of the uncertainty. And there are no buyers. Who's going to buy these products right now? So we're waiting, but the border is open. There are some intentions to bring humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. As far as I know, we also worked with Afghanistan and Turkmenistan to make sure that the Afghan-Turkmen border opens up to move humanitarian aid and food products. And the border crossing in Uzbekistan and Turmes, it started operations and it's used to deliver food products. Thank you, Larissa. And the last question of our session, do you plan, based on the results of today's roundtable, do you plan to develop an address or maybe a resolution for follow-up promotion of these issues and problems that were raised today? And this is our Aijan, our participant, is asking this question. So Maksat, probably to you, do you plan to have any address or resolution based on the results of today's discussions? I think that for our association, that's a must, and we need to talk to WTO because WTO is an international organization to make sure that they pay attention not just on customs fees but also on internal taxes, which should be reduced to support the development of small and medium businesses. What is the purpose of accessing WTO? To reduce taxes, to increase trade between countries, to ensure free trade and transit, and not to reduce customs fees. But that's great. But we're seeing an increase in local taxes, which is a wrong thing to do. And I think there is going to be an address. Larissa, do you plan to talk to the government of Tajikistan on some systematic issues? Of course, we're constantly working on this, specifically on transit permits on the national level. I mean, but we have regional problems. We're a lot of regional problems. We're from Tajikistan. We transit other countries. So the question was raised by the president of Kazakhstan during the meeting of the regional cooperation with respect to the requirement of technological pass from the Russian Federation, because the cargo is loaded. Once you come to the border, there is a requirement for technological inspection. They offload the cargo and then they load it again. And everything's done manual, and that's a big problem. And we need to speak about this, and we need to talk about this. And all the transportation companies in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, they're all talking about that. Maybe we could go together or individually and talk to the Russian Federation. There is a problem in Kazakhstan on the State Revenue Department that keeps cargoes for several weeks on the border. That's another question, and that has to do not just by us. We're not members of the European Economic Union, but that affects Kyrgyz transportation companies that are affected by these inspections, transit inspections. That needs to be discussed, and some decisions have to be made. At least holding a roundtable with representatives of this agency, so to have them explain the situation, why it is the way it is. And I think based on the results of today's discussions, we should come up with some recommendations, and this should be more regional recommendations or regional nature recommendations, so that we could appeal to the governments of all the 5 countries on the existing problems. And I think that we're gonna submit a draft of our recommendations to the CTJ project to be included into the overall package. Dmitry, are you with us? Dmitry? Yes. I apologize. the thing is that this issue that we're discussing right now during the session, we don't have any problems about the issue that we're discussing today in terms of the upgrade of the fleet and increase of the capacity of national transportation companies. We've done a lot in this regards, and we've been pretty effective, and all these programs are ongoing and they will continue to work, and we don't see any point in holding or having additional addresses or talking to the government. But on the regular basis, we have different expert groups that operate and work, both intergovernmental and with involvement of the private sector, that consider different issues, problematic issues of national transportation companies, their development perspectives, and so on and so forth. So this is a systematic work that doesn't stop for a single day. So talking about this platform that would allow us to come up with some new feedback, I don't think that's relevant for us. Thank you, Dmitry, and dear participants. And with that, the work of today's panel session is over. I would like to remind you that we participated in the Central Asian Trade Forum organized by the United States Agency for International Development, where we discussed the problems of transportation shipments in Central Asia. This session was organized with the support of the Union of International Transportation Companies of the Republic of Kazakhstan. And during the session, we had participants, Maksat Saktaganov, the president of Kazato, deputy director of Transportation Logistics Organizations, Kaz Logistics Association, Kanat Makushev, director of the Alem Trans Group LLP, Vladimir Stepchenko, director of AT Logistics LLP, Pavel Tolits, and representative of the International Automobile Transportation Companies RCUs, and the head of the Information Analytical Unit, Dmitry Chebenko, and the chairperson of the Dialogue Platform Partnership on Transportation and Logistics in Central Asia, Larisa Kislakova. And we discussed the issue of infrastructure and transportation development, issues of upgrade of the fleet in our countries, and we also raised issues about questions about Kazakhstan, about the reinstatement or of the Ministry of Transportation and Communications. Hopefully, our government will hear us. So thank you very much, dear participants, for your attention, for the time that you stayed with us while we discussed these issues. And I think that all the questions that we discussed during the roundtable today will be tackled to your benefit. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for information. Goodbye, and see you soon. Stay well. Thank you.